One today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021, and it is 6:04 p.m. and we are convening this evening as a special city council meeting. And the purpose of our meeting is strategic planning for the coming year. I'm not going to go through the agenda items to get us started, but I do want to say thank you to staff for putting the agenda items together. And thank you to council for submitting what you'd like to talk about. What we didn't do in either agenda is put other considerations or other items. So if you've got a burning item that you really want to talk about, you're going to have to fit it in one of these categories as loose or as tightly as you can. And what I want to commit to all of you to doing is keeping us on track in terms of time. So we've got, a pretty specific time frame that is outlined. And I just want to ask anyone, does anyone have objection to me keeping us to that time frame? Because if not, I will cut you off and I won't feel bad about it. Because I do think that, I want to give each item its respected allotted time. And so what we need to be okay with is that we may not talk in full on every topic. But we will do our best. And so I think, as always, brevity is the key to success, especially with so many of us coming together. But really the overall goal is for council to be able to share what we want to see in this coming year. And so thanks again to everyone to coming together to do that very thing. In terms of introductions, I think what we're going to do is just our classic roll call. If Summer, you'll take us through that.
You got it. We have Joel Linares, City Manager, Mayor Emily Niehaus, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, Brett Edge, Chief of Police, Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Karen Guzman-Newton, Moab City Council, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Nora Shepard, Planning Director, Ronnie Duresri, Moab City Council, and Tawny Knudsen Boyd, Moab City Council.
Thank you so much. And we'll move on to item 2. We are going to turn it over to Joel to review the existing department materials, and we're going to give this item until 7 p.m. Joel, take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. Again, 2020, 2021, year of COVID, strategic plan in the age of COVID. I guess this is what it looks like. We spent a lot of time discussing what we wanted to do this year and how this would look, and we decided that the 2-day breakup was best served with the ability to sit on TV for so long. Last year, we focused our strategic planning on staff, and we focused on presenting to you guys the current position of staff, the current position of infrastructure, and what we needed from you going forward. And we were really happy with the success of that. COVID set in and we weren't able to actually do a lot of things. But throughout the year, as we were meeting and things would come up, you guys would reference back to the things that we had told you in those department presentations, whether it was infrastructure or other departments. And we thought that that worked really well. This year, we felt like it was more important with you guys having that information we had provided you for you to tell us with that information what your priorities were, what you wanted to see going forward in the next year. We sent out an email asking everyone a list of items they would like to see. We compiled those lists, and that's how we generated our agenda. The agenda was based off the information you guys provided us as your priorities to have as discussion points tonight. And so that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to give just a brief discussion real quick over where we've been over the last year, and then we are going to open it up to you guys to discuss the materials that were provided to you by the departments. If there's questions or concerns or something you wanted to see or discuss about those, we can have that discussion. It doesn't have to take the full 45 minutes, but we wanted to give you guys the opportunity to review that material and then be able to bring questions to us. We also talked with staff. We've had several meetings with staff over the last couple of weeks leading up to this, and we couldn't decide what the best format was for staff in the Zoom world. We talked about requiring all the department heads to be here and having this full of 20 people, and we just didn't think that was very conducive of your time or staff's time. And so once we narrowed the agenda down to the list you guys provided, we tried to match the departments that would need to bring input for that agenda item, and everyone else we plan on taking back any questions from tonight to staff tomorrow and bringing back any information to tomorrow night that we need from tonight, and vice versa for Friday. That said, 2020 started off as a rough year pre-COVID. As you guys recall, we inherited a $1.2 million budget shortfall. We started off immediately with a spending and hiring freeze right out the gate, which led to a benefit reduction to all current staff members at that time. We held our strategic planning March 6th, knowing that's where we were at. We no sooner got that done and COVID set in the next week, and on March 13th, we had our COVID response and started telecommuting and sending everyone home. We had no sooner solved the $1.2 million budget deficit, and that little crisis with COVID set in, and we were shut down entirely in April and May. That shutdown, led by the state, ended up initially having us at a $1.4 million additional budget deficit. We no sooner had solved the 1.2 million, and we had an additional 1.4 to contend with. And we started figuring out how we were going to do that. And as we were going out of May, we didn't know what that was going to look like as far as help from the state or the federal government. And where Moab has no property tax and everything was closed, we had no idea what our revenues were going to look like going forward. To say it was a scary time to sit in an administrative seat would be putting it mildly. Carly and I spent a lot of hours sitting and just talking about different things we could try and do. And ultimately, we ended up reducing our staff at City Hall and across city staff by 20%. Not a fun day. Nothing I ever want to do again. I've teased with staff before things pick back up that if we had to do another reduction, the first one would be me, and it would be the next guy's responsibility to figure out what that reduction looked like. It was a long day, to put it mildly, and that led to a complete department restructure. And that complete department restructure has been ongoing. Carly and I, as recently as 2 weeks ago, we're still working on that. And we think at this point we have that completed. And we have generated a new organization chart, which we have been finalizing over the last week or so. And we expect to post that with you guys here in the next day or two. But as recently as last week, we were still kind of tweaking that out and getting it finalized. So from that point, because of the hiring freeze and the spending freeze, we ended up saving over $500,000 in spending so far this year. And with the 20% reduction in staff, we ended up saving well over $1 million in total savings from the previous year, which offset that initial $1.4 million loss that we were staring down. And then the world changed again. That was the theme for 2020. As soon as you thought you had the new normal figured out, the new normal changed. And no sooner were we used to really having our belt tightened and living within our means, the world of Utah rediscovered Moab and we got overrun. And we went from the quietest April and May that Moab has seen in decades, I would argue since the 50s, to the craziest August, September, October, November, December we've ever seen, and had record revenue those 6 months. And that record revenue has offset that initial loss. We did all of this without a reduction to the public and services. We also kept working with our state representatives and with the mayor really hard to acquire CARES funding. And that paid off in a big way as we acquired about $1.2 million in CARES funding on top of our savings that we had created for ourselves. So between those record revenues, the CARES funding, and our reductions, we were able to weather this storm really well. And it's put us in a situation to be really geared up for 2021 as we've come into this year. A part of what we're looking to do in 2021, just from an organizational standpoint, is we have created a new Parks, Rec, and Trails position. And our Parks Director has informed us that they're relocating and they are going to be leaving the city of Moab. And so we've created a new Parks, Recs, and Trails position, and that individual that we replace will now oversee parks, recreation, the pool, and trails again. And trails hasn't been a part of the city's real planning since I've been here. The last person who was over trails left before I even arrived at the city, and it's fallen to the wayside. And as we move forward, that's something we want to pick back up. And so this position we're replacing in the Parks and Rec and Trails position should be able to fill that role and then tie those 4 departments really together. There has been a little bit of gray area between those departments, and it's created a little bit of an underperformance in a lot of those areas. Not to anyone's fault in those departments, but there's just not clear ownership of where those departments overlap. And so part of what we're trying to do by putting it under one person is we're going to have one person be responsible for both those areas, so that gray area that's overlapping, that historically, at no fault of current staff, it's been this way before most of them even have gotten here. But those areas that have fallen to the wayside are going to get picked up because one person is going to be responsible for these areas. And so we're looking forward to that. We're in the process of finalizing a finance director to be brought into the city to really focus on long-term planning. Having gone through this budget crisis and having gone through COVID, this is not a situation that I want to do again, nor is it a situation that I want to leave to someone else. And Lord only knows how long we're all here on this planet, but you know, if that's 2 years or 20 years from now, when I'm not in this chair anymore, I want whoever follows me to be in a better situation than I got left when I picked up the pieces and had to start doing what we were doing. So that's one of our focuses. We're in the process of hiring a sustainability director. It is clear to me that this is a high priority of this council, and it's a high priority of administration here at the city. It's a position that we haven't had filled for a while. We were getting ready to fill it last February going into March, and then the world changed. And so we're now just getting back to that. In 2021, we're also in the process of expanding our policing. It has been a major concern for our community and for our constituents and for this council. Over the last year, we've had lots of residents speak up about noise, influx of traffic, red light, parking, all kinds of police enforcement that we'd like to see. This is not just a noise related issue. This policing seems to be coming up in multiple areas, and we want to be able to address it. And so we're working hard to do that. And one of our last focuses is Walnut Lane. I know Caitlin is our senior project coordinator, and she does an amazing job. She has moved that project further in a year than the year and a half we had it prior to that. And we've come a long, long ways. But Walnut Lane isn't just Caitlin, as amazing as she does. It is Nora, it is Chuck, it is Barry, it is Carly, it is me, it is Kelly Oliver, it is Ty over at facilities, it is Levi. I'm not joking you. There are some weeks when I bet you 20 of us work on the Walnut Lane project in any given week. And so it consumes a lot of our time across the board, and it is only going to increase until we finally have an area to break ground. And even once that happens and we get that first building built and we start shifting people around, it will continue. And so it is just a huge project that staff spends a lot of time on. And those are the main areas that we have really are focusing on going into the next budget year in our strategic planning, and where we want to be able to provide more services without the direction of this council, where we can see deficiencies just to begin with. And then, again, it's no fault of staff. These cuts, these reductions in force, these reductions in all of our spending, they cut into our ability to provide certain levels of service, or especially to expand services. And there's no doubt that with the influx of tourism that we saw in the second half of the year last year, we need an increase in services in policing. We don't have enough police force to keep up with what we're doing. We didn't have enough police force to keep up with what we were doing before we started doing noise ordinances and new speed limits and wanting to see parking enforcement. And so we couldn't keep up before. And now with additional policing being requested, we just need to see that get expanded. City Hall is open to the public. It is open by appointment. Front door is open. Vaccinations are rolling out. It's happening across all of our staff. It's happening across council. We've done things here at City Hall to try and incentivize all members of our staff to get vaccinated. As you guys know, CDC approved the vaccinations under an emergency order. Under the emergency order, we can't mandate vaccinations. And so we're doing things to try and incentivize all of our staff to get those vaccinations. And we are moving in that direction. And we are really looking forward to that sitting in over the next month, 2 months, and being able to meet again in person. I think we're all burned out on Zoom. In some ways, it's really efficient. I can get a lot of meetings in without ever having to leave my desk, but at the same time, it creates a world that's less productive by far. You don't have the capacity or the ability to just have that day-to-day interaction where you're working on projects with someone you're seeing. And that's really had an impact on moving forward projects. It hasn't had an impact a lot on our ability to provide those services that we do every day, whether that be business licensing or plan review or just the day-to-day paperwork. That's easy to keep processed. But those collaboration items where Walnut Lane and those things where we all need to get together, sometimes, we don't have a meeting planned, and by noon we realize we need to have a conversation about this today because this is what's happening. And it has really hindered those. You have to set up the Zoom meetings because of telecommuting, and a meeting that historically you could have had in an hour now is 3 days set out or 4 days set out based off everyone's calendar. And it has really affected those projects where that camaraderie and that working together is just really impacted. And so we're really looking forward going into next year to have the ability to meet together, have council meetings together, all be in one room. People, council are able to walk into City Hall and move stuff forward right from go. Those are the main points I wanted to make, that where we've been and as a city as a whole, what we've really focused on and what we've had to deal with over the last year and some of the major hurdles. And they've been big hurdles. They've been stuff that has taken so much of our time. We like to say here at City Hall, COVID is an inconvenience for everyone else. You go to the store and you have to remember your mask. You have to did I get my hand sanitizer? I can't go out and eat at the diner. But for us at City Hall, it is something we factor into everything we do all day long, whether it's a special event permit, whether it's our meetings and how they're going to function, whether it's we're going to hold recreation or events that can create community spread that then spread out. We're literally factoring it into everything we do. We're constantly looking up the government regulations as they're changing, and we're having to work them into every aspect of what we do. And we're an example as a governmental entity. And it's important that we set that example and we wear our masks and do what we're supposed to do. But it's not just merely an inconvenience that we have to remember to grab our mask as we walk in the door. It literally, how we set up parklets, how we're regulating the community. I mean, we're constantly factoring it into all things, and we're really looking forward to, at some point, who knows when that is, not having to deal with it anymore. With all of that said, I would be open to any questions about any of that, and I would also be open to any questions to the materials or the departments to have a brief discussion about those prior to moving into the agenda items that you guys wanted to discuss.
Joel, I'm curious with the Parks, Recs, and Trails, Financial Director, Sustainability, increased Police Department. What is the projected budget for that? And then, I mean, because we made, I don't want to say we made, but we recouped $1 million with job cuts previously. I mean, are we just basically replacing that?
I mean, obviously we're eating into that, but that wasn't the only place we were saving money. Obviously, with the way we tightened down everything and how we kind of redid operations, we're still saving money in operations day to day. And so I don't want to say we're spending all of it, but we're definitely spending some of what we've saved and what we've gotten back through our new way of doing business. But I don't know how else to provide those services at the levels that are being requested without hiring someone. I am not the type of an administrator who believes that the answer to any problem is, the joke in our industry is the answer to any problem is 2 men in a truck. You can solve any problem with 2 men in a truck. We don't do it that way. And I'm pretty fiscally responsible when it comes to spending. I don't like to hire for the sake of hiring to make other people's jobs easier. We're government, and we need to be spread thin, and we need to be able to operate and get our job done. But none of us should be comfortable in doing it. We should all be being maxed out. And by the time we hire someone to a department to help in that department, it needs to be because this person is literally doing everything that they can, and they're not able to meet the goals of the department. And so,
no, I mean, I totally understand that. I mean, and we're requesting these positions to be filled to 100%. I'm just curious if it, the sustainability of it, like where we were before. I know you guys saved 500,000 in department cuts. I mean, outside of employees. So
Karen, it's a great question. And, the finance director and the Parks and Rec director, those aren't additional spending because those are replacing people that were budgeted for before, and they're just being absorbed back into the budget already. So really what you're
explaining that, Joel. Sorry, that way I thought that was clear. So thanks for explaining that again.
And so the expansion that you're seeing is in the police department. We're going to prepare and present to you some budget materials tomorrow. But for example, in doing the budgeting so far, Public Works is about $500,000 cheaper than it was historically over the last year and the year before. Now, by expanding policing and hiring, we've hired 2 additional part-times. We're really trying to beef up the police department. That savings in Public Works is going to be offset by our spending in police department. So we're not necessarily spending the additional revenues that we're starting to see. We're spending what we've saved somewhere else. And so we're still living within our means of what we had. When I got to Moab City, and I don't want to speak about prior city managers. I don't know how it's always been done historically, but when I got here, budgeting was being done in a way that historically the revenues were increasing approximately 7% per year. And we would budget in a way that when we would forecast that 7%, we were building that into our budgets. So at any point, if we didn't receive that 7%, we were going to be 7% over our revenues. And we stopped doing that the year I got here. We budget off of our revenue from the previous year. And if we see a 7% increase, then we save that and put it in the bank towards our projects and the $40 million in infrastructure we all need. And then that next year when we budget, that 7% from the previous year is built into the budget. And that's where you see expansion in services that way. But we're no longer extending ourselves beyond what we can pay for in any given fiscal year.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for the effort to adjust or to look at workshop and adjust the organizational chart. And this council has been really clear with a sustainability director. And so I'm very much looking forward to moving forward with that. Especially after last night's meeting and the conversation about the HVAC system at the Mark. It's going to feel really good, I think, from a council level, but also from a staff level to have that type of that position to be able to do that research and provide that assistance to all of us.
And just from where we sit, as we tighten our belt, learn how to live within our means, get more revenue, and we start building that buffer back up that Moab City historically had 10 years ago, we want to be in a situation that when we bring forward those projects like the HVAC, that it is green, it does go through sustainability, and we're able to provide $150,000 towards that project instead of $50,000 towards that project. That's where we're trying to go. That requires us to get the sustainability, that requires us to live financially secure and to be able to create a buffer so we have that money sitting there for projects like that. And that we know that's this council's direction, and it's our direction as well. It's where we're trying to go. And sometimes the emergency overrides the situation, and that's where we're at. And we're tired of being in emergency mode. We want to be in prepared mode, and that's what we're working towards.
Well, as we are easing ourselves out of emergency mode and from high to moderate, if you will, and hopefully low and then no more. I just want to take the opportunity to nod to you as, the supervisor of all, that you've done a really incredible job. Where we are today is a reflection of, your leadership and also what we have, the quality that we have of our department heads and our staff across the board. Right before the pandemic, we had quite a shift in staffing. And so looking forward as we're, strategizing about tomorrow, it's always really important to say, like, the kind of the SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats? And I really do feel that one of, if not the biggest strength that we have in the city is you as our city manager, Joel. And I just want to say thank you.
I really appreciate that. And thank you for saying that. I value my team, and we value making sure that we're all able to cover each other when we're not here. And that is a part of also why we've switched up our organizational chart as we go. Carly and I shift the different departments around between us. One, because there's certain ones that I need to have as the manager, but we try and shift them around so everyone knows how to work with everyone and everyone knows what all the departments are doing. So if something happens, there's an accident or someone's not here, we're always building in that succession planning, even if it's unforeseen succession.
Well, and I mean, that clearly is worth repeating, that we do, a few years ago, we didn't have succession planning, and we do now. And we have an amazing deputy manager in Carly. Not many people know this, but when you first started as assistant city manager back in the day, you had a little bit of a car accident and scared us all. And it's just, there are always these moments of reckoning where you just think, well, what if? And so, we're trying to plan for that. And so it really is nice to have Carly, and to see you and Carly as a really dynamic team and executive leadership team. And I'm assuming this is Joel. I don't know if this is your item. So I see Ronnie's hand. So I'm giving you the chance to kind of direct the conversation.
Sounds good, Ronnie.
I don't know how everyone else wants to use this time. I had, as I read through the various pages, I had random questions for you. And so maybe I'll just ask a few that I think might be interesting to other people, and I'll save some of the more obscure ones for when I meet with you one-on-one. But just out of curiosity, when I was reading the Film Commission one, do we have any just idea of how things compared in 2020 under COVID? I didn't know if Biga was, traveling, or, if there were, I just didn't know if there were many shoots happening.
That's a great question. And like everything else in May and April, it was nothing. Once everything opened up here in June and July, California stayed under some pretty strict restrictions. And so, like everything else, we've seen shooting and filming explode. Biga has been extremely busy. She's been out on taking people out on site repeatedly. We're trying to figure out a way, and Biga's been working on a way to track what she's projecting that's bringing into the community in the form of sales tax. And she's provided us a couple, rough estimates of what she thinks it is, and it's daunting. And so it has been very busy. The film industry has really been working in Moab this year because Utah doesn't have a lot of restrictions versus California. And so we've seen that really update.
Okay, well, I'm sure that's exciting for our local crews and vendors. And so then moving on to finance, I had a question, since we were just discussing sewer rates, well, more specific to institutions at our last meeting, but I did notice there were comments in there about, I can look up the exact page, but how the last project we did was too low. And I was like, I didn't know if that was supposed to be projections. And I was like, oh, I don't think we discussed that before. So I better ask what that means. Let me find the actual language. Oh, under utilities, it says, we are working on getting an updated sewer rate as the last project was done too low. This will help bring both our funds back to the black and work towards system upgrades. So in the context of the institutions discussion we were having, does this mean there's a larger overall problem? And is this an argument for our need to do a rate study sooner, or am I misunderstanding what's in the report here?
No, can you tell me what page you're looking at, Ronnie?
Yeah, I think it's page 13 of the full packet, and it's at the right at the bottom. It's the very last paragraph on utilities under finance. And I might have misunderstood context, but I wanted.
I think, and I will check on that.
Yeah.
We don't currently have a finance director. And
Yeah.
a lot of that we used from the previous, my guess is that was before the last rate adjustments and what we've been doing, but I will follow up on that.
Okay, no, I just wanted to check if it was, yeah.
Yeah, no, we actually met today and we discussed the sewer rates and the discussion we had last night in the council meeting, and we are looking to go to Zion's and get that information as how much it will cost. And we had the same issues and discussion you guys had collectively as a body, as a staff. So definitely something to look at there.
Okay, cool. And then can you just, since we don't always know everything about every department, but I want to thank you and the staff again for this packet, because it's always such an amazing way to be reminded of all the myriad of different tasks that different departments are involved with, and just how much they collaborate and work together. So thank you all for that. And I'm always intrigued by the different cost saving you guys tell us about. So can you just educate us? It was interesting in HR to read about the possibility of local or on-site psych evals. I think these are probably for new hires, but I was like, oh, did we either just not know we could do that before? Or do we have new resources in the community that will make that possible? I can see how that would save money.
There are some resources in the community. We use psych evals for when we're hiring law enforcement officers. And we're trying to bring them basically into Moab in-house so we can do that. We've also, yeah, that's the main thrust of it.
Okay. Anybody else can raise their hand when they have questions. Otherwise, I'll keep asking my random questions. So obviously we're all, delighted by the grant funding that the MARC was able to get. Is there anything about the funding outlook for the coming year, say, that would lead us to believe that will change, or is the outlook pretty good for continued grants in that area?
Here's the problem with grants in the age of COVID. You have to show a loss in revenue.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
We've been so successful at getting grants,
Mm-hmm.
we no longer have a loss in revenue. The grants have offset our revenue loss. And so a lot of the grants that are now available, we're no longer eligible for.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if, yeah. Okay.
They're at 99%. The thing that's interesting though is the main four revenues that we get, sales, TRT, resort, and highway, those are tied to the tourist industry. And so those revenues keep growing. The MARC, the REC, and the MRAC have had their numbers reduced. They haven't been holding events. So every month that goes by, they're still losing money. Unlike everything else where we're now making money. So as the months go by, we're tracking that revenue loss, and it's minor compared to the big picture. But as that percentage drops in those departments again, we go back and try and get more grants. But as of last month, we were at 99% and we just weren't eligible. So as that number falls off again, going into April, May, and June, if it gets back down to 90%, 80%, we'll go back into grants and start trying to get that offset again.
But Joel, I might unmute. I'm not on mute. So I'm just curious, though, because there's a lot of grants that we have applied for, and it wasn't contingent on COVID numbers or
Yeah.
or losses. And I mean, and that brings a question. I mean, there's going to be so many opportunities coming up because of who is in charge at the federal level. I mean, and I know not every department is used to doing grant funding. Are we going to try to put that onto the sustainability director? I mean, it feels like someone needs to be in charge of that. And I'm just curious who.
Well, I don't mean to answer for you, Joel, but it's my expectation that as you and Carly supervise certain departments, that you collaborate with those department heads. We have incredible technical writers right here. So I guess I made that assumption, Karen, that it was collaborative between either Joel or Carly and the department head that they supervise. And speaking of grants too, I wasn't sure how to share this or when, but I did receive an email that says that regarding continued federal aid, that let me just read this so I get all the numbers right, but that Moab City is still set to receive an additional $600,000 in COVID relief money. The government, the state of Utah is expected to receive $2.7 billion additional. Grand County is projected to get $1.89 million. So that was just sent to me today as what is projected. In that vein, whether it's COVID money or whatever money, I do, see the pattern of, between you and Carly, Joel, and then working with department heads and supervisors.
That COVID grant is awesome news. I hadn't heard that. That's amazing. To answer Karen's question, the grant process for different segments of our departments is so different. Historically, in other cities where I've worked that have had more staff, we've had dedicated grant writers, that literally full-time employees. That's all they do.
Yeah.
But here, because we don't have a staff that's that large, we've kind of got it broken into areas. And so the police department, we have one employee who does them. She works with Carly and I on those. In the rec trails, we have 2 employees that kind of do them. In engineering and planning, we have 1 employee who kind of does them. So it's kind of like, it just kind of depends on the area of where the grant is, depending on who we go to say this one's yours or this one's yours. We kind of delegate them out based off area to try and spread that workload around. Because like I said, it could be a full-time job just writing grants. As we move forward into this planning tonight, I'm not opposed to changing that, and I'm definitely not opposed to like restructuring how that works. That's kind of the program we inherited, and it's just one of the things that we've never changed because we've been working on changing so much other stuff.
I'm just going to say, from my standpoint, unless you have a really large budget, it makes a lot more sense for individuals to learn those skills. I mean, it's a great skill to learn, but then if they have the support from someone else, I like the fact that it buoys them up. But also, in my experience, grant writing, you have a much stronger grant when the bulk is written by the person who is closest to the ground doing that work. So whether it's a public works thing or it's a law enforcement thing, some of the writing is just much easier if someone who's on the ground doing the work can put it in a context. And obviously there are technical things that you need, help with, and someone can teach you. But I really like the idea of people learning. I have wondered as a council, when we learn about grants, if there's maybe more efficient way than just a random email for us to let you and Carly know, or I don't know if you guys want like a shared Google Doc list where we post something there and give you a heads up with a phone call. But sometimes it's hard as a council member to know like the best way to let you guys know about stuff, because sometimes it's stuff you know about and sometimes it's grant you don't know about.
All right, I'm going to speak for me on this one, then Carly's going to have to answer. It's going to shock you. The best way for you to tell me about grants is email. Right?
I'm sorry. What was that? Wait. This is recorded?
I'm dead serious. Emails with grants is the easiest for me because I can just forward it to the person I need to do the grant. I don't have to call them, I don't have to text them, I can literally just forward that email. I don't have to respond. It's just gone and it's off my desk and that person's now working on it. Prior to COVID, we probably had 3 people who worked on grants at the city. Since COVID, we have about 7. And so we have been trying to teach other people in other departments how to do them. Grant writing is a skill and some are better at it than others. There's just no getting around that. We have 2 or 3 that are really good at it here at the city, and we have 2 or 3 who are learning. And it's going to take those who are learning a little bit to muddle through it and figure it out. Caleb?
I have a question about, I think it's finance. You and I have talked about impact fees. It seems like the city has availed itself of all the sales tax revenue that it can. But my understanding is that there's opportunities in impact fees to account for the fiscal burden that new development creates on the city. And I was under the impression that that might be getting some attention, but I don't see mention of it in the.
It absolutely is another area where we can raise impact fees for revenue towards that burden. Summer and I started working on that the 1st of March last year, and we actually posted, it was actually the end of February, we actually posted the legal notices and started the process to start implementing new impact fees, to start going towards an impact fee analysis study, which we're required to do. And we have to pay a firm like Alliance Public Finance or another institution, just like sewer rates or water rates, to do that. We're required to by law. And then the bottom fell out and we went broke because they shut everything down and it just got tabled. And it's something we just haven't got back to. So we had full on published the legal requirements of what we have to put in the paper before we can request an impact fee analysis. And we'd started that process. It's absolutely something we intend to do. And it's something that my office is going to lead. We're going to do that here sooner rather than later.
Okay, that's good to know. And then a relatively trivial thing. We've also talked about making the possibility of the gym being a 24-hour access. And I didn't see that on the MRAC list of possible goals.
And that's because that hasn't really been discussed with the MRAC director. That's been in engineering. And I've been talking to Chuck about that and how we can get that engineered and start figuring out what the cost associated with that would be. It's not that it's not one of our goals. It's in the phase of it's not filtered down that far yet.
Yep. Thanks.
Can we talk about a few other MRAC things? Do you have any update? I know, interior walls and exterior cladding are, a hot topic, but and we're always struggling, but is there any update on that? I'm guessing interior walls are something that have to routinely be done every so often because of humidity and other things, but I know the exterior cladding was more of a materials thing, so I didn't know if we'd made any progress there or if there was a hope soon.
I'm probably going to let Carly talk about this one. It's her department. I will say that I should just let Carly talk about it. But like 3 months ago, we actually brought down a company who cut a section out of the interior wall to try and to determine what was causing the water damage that's causing it to flake. And I'm not sure what the report back on that was, but I know they're working on getting that resolved. Carly, do you have anything to add on that?
I know that Chuck is developing that report, but that's exactly right. There's damage. It appears it wasn't caulked right or something around the windows. And so the interior walls too are just sort of flaking off, and probably that needs to be repaired before the exterior. And your recollection is also correct, Ronnie, that there's a materials issue and an installation issue with the siding over the entire MRAC when it was constructed. So those are something that will need to be addressed eventually.
Can I ask you about I saw the MRAC is looking at fee increases and a simpler fee structure. And I appreciated all the stuff in there about, trying to weight fees towards visitors to keep things affordable for locals. But is there anything else we should know about in the works?
I think that is pretty self-explanatory. I'm happy to answer more questions about like the specifics of those. We do feel like we did some investigation. Emily Sukitic did some investigation about different fees across the state and just realizing that we are very affordable, and maybe that we can, it might be advisable to raise our rates. I think it was, I can't remember the percentage across the board. And our fee structure is really complicated. it has like dozens of different options that are probably not necessary with time, and we're going to see if we can simplify that, just for the sake of administration and you know, it's just, I don't know how it sort of got so complicated over time, trying to accommodate every single different user's needs, but that can probably be simplified.
Okay, well, thanks for all the information on, you know, the different ways in which you guys save stuff, and it's exciting to see shower revenues up, and some of those classes, I'm glad they're coming back, and the roll class sounds like a great idea. So yeah.
And the track is open now. I think the 15th this month, we're getting back to the regular hours. So we're so close to being back to normal with that facility.
And we made $200 in showers yesterday alone.
Oh,
We just need to build a shower facility.
Making it rain.
Well, I saw your note about outdoor showers, so hey.
Yeah, like a car wash, but showers.
On parks, can you remind me of the timing on the non-native fish removal? Did that happen already?
The slaughter has not happened yet. We're doing it, so we're going to start draining the pond.
No,
down.
it is not a slaughter.
I figured it was a sushi opportunity.
These are invasive fish. These are not good fish.
They are very damaging to the environment, and they are hurting the wood ducks. They're damaging that whole ecosystem. I just do feel squeamish about the whole thing. So next week we're going to start drying the pond down, and it takes about a week to do that. And then the week after, we're planning to apply the Rotenone with that, and it'll take a couple days for that to take effect, and we'll start cleaning it out. We have never done it before, so we're trying to get it done within a week.
I'm really excited to see what it looks like. We have so much discussion around the fact that it's so dangerous, and that's why we have that really awkward fence around the pond. And I really would love for us to, like, you know, take this opportunity when drained to really say, like, what can we do to make this pond a safe, enjoyable, splashable, interactive water feature for residents to enjoy. I really would like that. So let's take lots of photos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and get rid of the fish.
Get rid of those carp. They're monsters.
I know money's limited, but I thought there were a lot of good ideas in the parks list from the ADA improvements we can make in the shade covering and some of the playground equipment. So I guess I'm crossing my fingers we find some money.
That is one of the things I forgot to list. We adopted the RAP tax last year.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can use some of those funds to go towards that effort.
You know, we have a pattern in our community that, like, a user group emerges and then they get really passionate about something, and somehow they wrangle council and staff to help them out, and then we get a really cool thing. And I feel like pickleball is something that's happening right now. I feel like a good example of that also was when Christina Sloan and others, you know, rallied around the bouldering park at Lions Park. There's lots of examples like that where, you know, a specific user group says, hey, we want to see something, and then they, like, kind of charge forward. And I love the idea of the city being a platform for that instead of the, like, lead agency of that. You know what I mean? And so I am hopeful that, you know, with parky kind of projects moving forward, that we can continue to be a platform and provide, you know, the ability for residents to also interact with us and do, you know, when we think of grant writers, you know, we didn't really list community members as grant writers as well. So I do think that that's, you know, something worth fostering. And so I am hopeful that, you know, that's something that we'll see as a pattern with the pickleball courts.
Can I ask Nora a question? So I saw in your budgetary priorities that the funds to hire a consultant to assist with a major revamp of the development code. And I know, you know, for those of us who started in 2016, you know, we definitely have been excited about re-upping or whatever, refreshing development code. But it has always been a little bit confusing to understand how much money that would take and how much time it would take. In some ways, I feel like if we had started the day I started on council, maybe we would have been done by now, but of course we didn't have the money or the, but I am curious, like in this day and age, what you think, what's realistic with time and money?
And we're not really sure at this point. Carly is working on an RFP, and we will have to define the scope of those services. So, you know, we can certainly hire somebody to look at the code and reorganize it and get all the cross references right and make sure all the definitions are there and take the ones out that aren't referenced in the code and, you know, kind of consistency. We can do something, we can ask someone to do just that. I don't know, that would probably be $50,000. But then if we want to go the next step and have them really look at the content and try to make, you know, some really positive changes, I would say I asked for $100,000, and that's with a lot of staff time involved as well.
That's in addition to the other 50, so 150 total or
total. I mean, it might cost more than that. We don't really know what the market's like out there right now for this kind of thing, or if there's anybody who's even willing to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's a chunk of change for sure.
Anybody else?
So Nora, excuse me, Nora, let me throw this out. The process that you just described just reminded me off the top of my head in the aerospace business when we're doing really complex projects and so forth. There were software tools, and I'm sure they're commercially available now, that basically would take any collection of pointers, basically, you know, with a world of paragraphs, all of which reference a wild number of other things, and they create for you a cross-reference table. In other words, if you're plowing through the code and you think you want to move noise, for example, to some other place, then this little tool makes sure that you don't inadvertently omit references by other places to noise, and where noise references other places. So, I mean, this is what we're talking about doing, but I'm just bringing this up because there's some nice tools that would make the document a lot more accurate, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that much might be, as opposed to just having Mike come in, for example, say, this code is so screwed up, you know, just hand it to me, I'll fix it for you. But the tools would probably do a better job.
I agree with you, and hopefully we can use as many of those tools as possible to make it right, because we all know at this point it's pretty rough. So yeah, I'm sure there are advances that we can take advantage of.
Okay.
Can I ask the chief one or two random questions?
As long as they're random.
Oh, okay.
And not about OHV, because that's later on our agenda.
Okay. Now for the scintillating topic, well, actually not, because I've had a friend victimized by it, but of DUIs. I was just curious. Thank you so much for the statistics, but I don't know if there's anything such as normal, but so like 24 DUIs for 2020, and granted, we might have had lower visitation, but is there any such thing as normal? Is that low or high, or hard to say?
That's lower than what we saw in 2019.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers from 2019, but if I recall correctly, those numbers were roughly twice that.
Yeah. And then thanks for mentioning the use of force policy that the community review group is working on. I just thought some people listening might not know that work's been ongoing, and I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to educate us about that group or.
Yeah, we were on the last two phases. So what we did is it was such a large policy that it wouldn't make sense to send the entire policy and tell the review group to read it and get back to me with feedback. Ideally, we would have been able to meet in person to do this, but because of COVID, we're doing everything remotely and electronically. So what I did is I broke the use of force policy, which is it's like a 14, 15 page policy, broke that into multiple sections, and then we've been going through it section by section by section. just today, I sent the email to the group to review the last section and get back to me with comments. Each section, I'm providing them with 3 weeks to accomplish the review and get feedback to me, just so that I can respect everyone's time and whatnot. So we're doing that last section now. When we're done with that section, we'll go back. I'll provide them with the edited version of the policy based on the suggestions that they have made. And then we'll do one final review of that to determine if they have any other comments or ideas going forward. And if they don't, then we're done and we'll publish it. I can tell you that we've made 3 changes. One was fairly substantial. The other 2 were relatively minor, but maybe, if not more, at least equally important. We've had some really good discussions about use of force, and it's been a great opportunity for us to educate members of the group who would then take that out to the community about various topics related to use of force and why officers might do this or why the policy might read something else. So it's been an absolutely phenomenal opportunity, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the community on an annual basis to go back and review the policy and just make sure that we're still in line and that we're still transparent and consistent with their expectations, but also with the realities of law enforcement.
Brett and all, I'm gonna say we're at 7 o'clock now. So thank you for that section of the agenda, Joel. I'd like to give everybody just 2 minutes, if that's okay, to just stretch. And even if it's just to shake your head or turn your camera off and just take an eyeball break for just 2 minutes. And then we'll come back and we will convene with the continuing and current council comments. So see you in 2. Okay, everybody. Start the video. I think that's going to be helpful for us for the next rest of this meeting and for tomorrow as well. So thanks to everybody for taking a break and coming back. I'm going to put a little piece of candy in my mouth. Sorry about that. We're now on item 3, overview of continuing and current city council commitments for 2021 and 2022. Joel, take it away.
So in my meetings with you guys individually, I brought up to you guys the fact that we are working on an RFQ for a visioning process for the city. And in that visioning process, we're looking to do visioning, strategic planning, and a general plan. We're trying to tie those 3 things together to make them comprehensive so they'll work together. We've had some different ideas and thoughts from the 5 of you as we've talked, and I wanted to bring this up in this meeting so we have a meeting where we're all together and we can talk about what that looks like to you guys. Our idea and our logic in this was, we feel that our council, all 6 of you, do a really good job and are really informed and do exactly what you're supposed to do as council members. And for the most part, you guys all kind of have a similar way of thinking and want to see similar goals and outcomes. But we never can kind of get on the same page necessarily because we don't have a solid plan. And we're kind of at times just working from one thing to the next, and it feels like we're bouncing around a lot. And we feel like if we could get that honed in to where we had one document that we could all work off of, that it could really help us harness the cohesiveness of this group. And so that's what we would like to do. We'd like to put it on RFQ and try and tie those 3 ideas together and have them work with you guys and us to form that plan that we can then know as a guideline for staff and council where we're going forward. And I wanted to give this group the opportunity to discuss that real quick and make sure that everyone is in agreement with that strategy, and is that something that we all want to see?
So by commitments in this agenda item, what you really mean is like, you would like a commitment from us for working toward this idea of a plan and putting it out there as an RFQ.
Yeah, this will not be a cheap plan to build. And so we're looking at putting some capital to it. It'll be probably in the 6 figures to do this. And I want to make sure that before we spend a lot of time going down this road, and if this is a good expenditure of our revenue, if the group collectively feels that way.
Can you explain a little bit more? So we've definitely talked as a council and agreed on a visioning, on expending money for visioning. We've got a general plan that it feels like we reference when convenient, and then we have a sustainability plan that was never finalized. So just be a little more specific with what we'll have in our hands at the conclusion of what you're proposing.
Yeah, so we're talking about a visioning, which is essentially a long-term plan. We have strategic plan, which is what we're doing in the short term. We have our general plan that outlines how we're actually going to do this. And we have our sustainability plan of like what our sustainable goals are to achieve those larger objectives. If we just, as Carly and I have been discussing this, if we just update our visioning, well, our strategic plan isn't really working with that, and our general plan hasn't been updated and probably isn't in line with any of it. And so we kind of feel that we can't do one without the other. And rather than do a visioning and then doing a general plan and then doing the strategic plan, or doing them separately where we end up with different timelines and different ideals, it will take a long time to do all of them. Whereas if we try and do them all at once collectively, they're going to be more comprehensive, they're going to be more cohesive, and we're going to get them done in a shorter time frame. So this group has the ability to take advantage of them. And
it would be the same vendor that we're working with. So we want to make sure that that is a solid company. We talked about Envision Utah. Is Envision Utah a company that, or an organization that could do this type of triplet planning? Carly, do you want to address kind of the groups we've looked at?
There is someone that I've worked with before up in northern Utah, and they do some like regional big plans, like Wasatch Choice 2040 for like the Wasatch Front. And they, I mean, I don't want to speak for them at all, but they're often very interested in helping organizations with planning about like cutting edge issues that are facing Utah and facing the West. They're just an idea, like an organization that I have a lot of respect for, and their work has been really good in the past. So, but someone like them is what we would have in mind.
Hey, Joel, can I just go, I'm looking at the strategic planning agenda, and I just want to make sure, so we're kind of at this overview of continuing and current city council commitments, not yet at
No.
visioning.
I skipped Carly. I apologize. Can we finish the visioning and then we'll jump back to that one?
Yeah, so we'll do that and then go back. Sure. Yes.
Notice Carly didn't jump right in to make sure she could steal the floor for a minute. She was just like, you want to skip me? Feel free. I don't have to say anything.
And visioning was going to get 15 minutes and continuing council commitments was going to get 15 minutes. So, yeah, we've got like another 6 minutes for visioning.
Whatever.
And Karen's raising her hand like she really wants, she's stressing out. So you
No
better
stress,
speak.
no stress, man. Just so, but I just speaking with the NAR group, they, I'm just throwing this out there. They said that they could potentially be interested in doing a visioning process for us. They'd have to get it approved, but they would use it as an academic tool to use as a role for other communities. But then they really recommended Future West, and they're out of Bozeman, Montana, and I guess they work with Gateway Communities, and Jake just had nothing but amazing things to say about them too. So that's it.
Can we have a committee of just maybe like Joel, Carly, and a couple council members to vet the vision group that we select for this process?
Oh, like on
Absolutely.
And maybe even be part of the drafting of the RFQ.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, who?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because the problem with bringing in a group is that you spend so much time trying to get them to understand who you are and what you want. The more we can get that honed in from go, the better off we are.
So I just saw Tani's hand.
I thought you were going to say who would volunteer. Did I?
I was about to say who would
That
like.
was a volunteer.
Okay, so Tani's in.
I'd be happy to participate.
Halen's in. And I mean, I am certainly willing as a non-council member, as a blender, to also participate if you feel like that would be helpful. That would be 5 of us. Okay, so then that's out, and Nora's raising her hand because you want to be part of it too. Yeah, okay. The only thing, Nora, is that your plate is the fullest plate of any plate I've ever seen. And you'll definitely be part of the whole vision, but it's much larger than land use and planning. So, I mean, I don't know. I want to forgive you of participating in the RFQ and the selection, unless it's just, you just must.
Well, we'll figure it out. I mean,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah. Ronnie, you had your hand too.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to thank Joel for making that comment, because I think the painful thing for a lot of us working with consultants has been they come from outside, they try to apply something from the Wasatch Front or something else to us, or they do spend time collecting information from our residents, but it's almost like they don't really hear it. So they just start with a template for the Wasatch Front, and they fill in a few things that are Moab-y. And so I don't know what the trick is. And thank you all for volunteering. But I kind of am hoping that there is a way to get someone who understands communities like ours a bit better, because I just feel like we'd get more out of it. It's just ever so painful personally, as someone who's a tightwad, to spend money on things where you feel like you don't get something great out of it. And so it is hard for me to spend this level of money, but at the same time, I feel like we've been talking about it so long and we know it can be really expensive. And honestly, some visioning places, it seems like, have 3 times the price tag of some other people who would probably do it well. So hopefully we'll just keep that in mind.
One other group for us to consider is the group that did the visioning for Ogden. So Mayor Mike really speaks super highly, and like friends that I have in that area that, you know, that live in Ogden really felt like they did a dynamite job. And I'm not saying we're like Ogden. I mean, we're certainly very different from so many cities, but they're probably worth to put on the list as well. It's a company from Colorado, but I can't remember their name right now. But I mean,
From Glenwood Springs, Emily?
I think so.
And they did Gunnison, which has a state highway running through their town. They've done Ridgeway, they've done, and they are amazing. I know I have the info.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. So let's put them on the list as well.
Do you want us to just send you ideas if we, within a certain time frame, if we have others? Send them to Carly or send them to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I guess we're putting Carly as the lead of the vision. Joel, are you okay with that?
That was what we were doing before. It ties in exactly to how we've been doing it.
I like this. That feels really good to me. Mike, what's up?
Well, my question is, from whom does this vision appear? I mean, are you speaking about the vision of the council members, of staff, or the vision of the residents at large? I mean, reason I ask is I can remember a few years ago when, Chief, what was it that came in town? Was it hotels or whatever it was? And we were talking, and Landmark, I think, was a big deal. And they came in and made, I thought was, a nice set of diagrams with different options, ranging from little town the way it is now to gigantic town and steps in between. And they would go over to the Grand Center and, lots of little push buttons and who wants this and who wants that. And they would tally up a bunch of hundreds of responses with the 8 little push button clickers and all this kind of good stuff, which I thought was kind of interesting, all right, to pick up impressions from a wide variety of people, not just ourselves. But
I think we said we were going to be the platform and that we would welcome the community. It wouldn't be just the council. But I am going to cut you off because my alarm just went off and we're at 7:15. So we're going to pivot now back to the agenda item that Joel may or may not have purposefully skipped over. Just kidding. Okay. So sorry to cut you off, Mike, but we're going to move on. So Carly?
Am I doing this agenda item, Joel?
Or Joel? I mean, it sounded like Joel was punting
This is what we discussed when we were in the foyer the other day and you were sitting in the chair and made that list of items that we were talking about.
Oh, I know. I put the list together. I just didn't know I was doing it.
Yes,
Okay.
You're good to go.
And this won't take very long. I guess I thought it might be helpful for the council just to get a visual sort of idea of the list of things that Joel and I understand and the rest of staff understand are currently things you are committed to, projects that are ongoing or that we're anticipating to be imminent this year. So one group of big projects is obviously the hotspot projects, hoping that we're going to get that funding, and we anticipate starting construction for 3 of those maybe sometime this year, or at very least getting bids and design going for those projects. So I don't know if anyone had any comments on whether we have missed the mark on some of these, or wanted to add to the list of the current work we're doing. And I know, speaking with Joel and other our staff, I mean, this is definitely already a year of work. If that kind of makes sense. So if there's a substantial change from this list, we'd want to hear it. If there's something you want to get rid of, and if you want to get rid of something, that means that something else can go in its place. If that makes sense, if there's something new. But you can imagine, you only have, 26 meetings about a year and about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do all that work. So you're looking at 50 hours of work as a council. And we're just trying to map out and understand what your current commitments are and your current workload as we strategize for the next year.
Yeah, sometimes it can feel like as we go into a strategic planning that it's a blank slate and we're here to create this whole new work for the next year, what we want to do, and it carries over. And we just wanted to, reiterate that we have ongoing obligations that we've already created, and we can more than happy to take on new things, but we have to figure out how they fit in and drop off something if we need to.
And when you talk this year, you're talking about like March to March.
Yeah,
Eventually.
the budget year, like, I think it's kind of can be fluid, but the year that we're talking about for this strategic plan.
Okay.
Any questions or reactions to that?
Do you want to share your list, screen share your list?
Yeah, this was included in your packet so that the public should be able to see it. I'm happy to share my screen. Would that help? Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
And is this editable? It looks like a PDF.
Yes, I have the Word version and I'm happy to take notes. I could also try to find the editable version.
And so are you looking at council for council to say who among us are committed to these projects, or if we are wanting to spend time on these projects? So like, what are you asking specifically the commitment?
We're not asking anything. We're saying, this is our list of what we are doing. Council has directed us to do this, and this is our current workload of projects you've given us. This is not our day-to-day normal stuff that we're doing on top of. This is what we're working on for you. So if we all of a sudden through this process have 20 new things we want to work on, that's not realistic.
We might have
if we do want to do 20 new things, then what do we want to take off this list of what we're currently doing? But if we want to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, then depending on what they are, maybe those can be blended in. So we just wanted to be cognitive of the current, this is council's workload, right? This is the things you guys are working on in your meetings twice a month. Like Carly said, 26 meetings, 2 hours a meeting. By the time we do our recaps and whatever it's been up to in public hearings, we have about 52 hours. So this is, in 52 hours, this is what council has to work through.
I thought I saw Bike Skills Park.
That is because we're doing like the toilet and stuff, so it's ongoing.
We're still working on the Bike Skills Park.
But is that a project that just needs to, like, that'll just finalize? I guess what I'm asking is, like, in terms of, you're saying like, what can we take off? And I'm like, no
one's requesting we take off anything. We're just, we're showing you a comprehensive list of, this is what you guys are already working on. So as we add stuff coming out of strategic plan, be mindful of, this is what your workload already is.
Oh, so this is a reminder to council, like, hey, we got a lot of stuff going on, so pump the brakes if you want to, like, take on any additional stuff. And so then kind of what I'm hearing is, well, we just had this conversation about vision. That's adding to this city projects commitment list.
Yep.
And I think, Carly, did we want to add complete streets resolution to this one as well?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that, because doesn't that sort of dictate some of the other work plans out there?
Yeah, complete streets was, we didn't add it because it's up for discussion on this agenda for tomorrow. So it can be added, absolutely. But so some of them, it's like, we definitely know you want, but haven't like taken a vote or something like that. So they're sort of in limbo. But this is the kind of input we'd like.
So you're like, this is the list, be caution not to add to this list. And by the way, we're adding to this list, both vision and complete street.
Carly and I, we know we're going to add to this list. We're always taking on more. So we're not like sitting here, we're not sitting here trying to say, don't give us more. We're just saying, be mindful of what we already have and what you guys are already working on. And if we're going to add visioning RFQ, that probably fits somewhere in this list. That's not a huge project or lift. But if we want to all of a sudden, if someone said, while the ponds drain, we want a full redraw of the park, Old City, we want it to be completely redone, we want to figure out what that costs. Like, we start adding things that are huge projects, then something off this list probably has to go.
Well, and we are going to right away add vision, and we're going to right away put complete streets, even if we're talking about it tomorrow. But I did want to, like, grab the red pen, so or a red pen.
Yeah.
And like cross off a couple of things. I mean, there are items on this list that are like staff to complete, but have, so, because we're talking strategic, I think what I'm hearing back is like, while this is a list of things that are still under construction, even if it's not a construction project. And so, and what I'm hearing too is like, that takes the capacity of staff to be able to like implement projects, right?
Yeah. But like a water conservation plan, for example, that's very staff heavy and very water board heavy, but that will take an hour of your council time. So you're down to 49 hours, So
Yeah.
definitely, I don't mean to just like draw these hard boundaries about it. It's just like, as a group here, as a team,
Yeah,
what we're doing. Yeah.
But Carly, like amending the code to allow for breweries, I mean, isn't that actually pretty easy? I'm not trying to be dismissive of the planning department, but I mean, if we're going to add it to C2, I mean, it's written. I mean, is that like how much time is that going to take?
I mean, I've sort of thought about it in terms of, we have to like do public noticing, public hearings is staff heavy. And then of course, it's going to take about a half hour from your precious council time too. So you're now down to 48 and a half hours. Does that make sense when I'm sort of trying to understand how we're.
and did some of these items come from our spreadsheet? That's why I bet that's on there too. Is that
you guys
and pennies
Karen-
add up to dollars.
Karen's accurate. Like, that's not a hard one. That one's not taking a ton of staff time. But that is, like Carly said, if that's on an agenda for the council and we only have 52 hours to work with council meetings and it takes half an hour, if we have 5 or 6 text amendments, that's 4 hours of your 52 hours. You're down to 48 hours. I mean, so they don't seem like they take a lot of time, and maybe it's not, that one might not be a staff capacity issue. That one might be, it's a council agenda issue. So we just want them on there. They don't all take a ton of time by no means. We just want to be mindful as to like, this is the comprehensive, and we're not probably going to get through all this year. Like, this is what we are working on, and they might not all get finished this year, but we just want to be mindful. This is not in any way an attempt to deter you from giving us more or doing more or nothing at all. It's just completely to be mindful of like, this is what we're already doing as you keep going.
Do you guys want us to raise our hands or just start yakking?
Yeah.
Let's unshare the screen so that we can see each other. Sorry. Thanks, Ronnie.
So the list is great. Thanks. It's a great reminder. And I think now that we're having this conversation, I might just need a little more time to digest it and kind of rank in my own mind, or maybe it helps to know if there's some that are nearly off the list, like if we think they'll be done soon. But I guess the big one for me, since we've discussed, I mean, for many of our residents, their number one quality of life issue is noise. And we have the OHV land use changes on there, but it just seems like a lot of what we're talking about doing is going to take a lot more time than that. So I just didn't know if that was reflected heavily enough, but it does seem we're committed to it. So
I agree. We need like more bullet points based on our meeting just yesterday. And so I'm not sure, Carly, if you updated your lease. Yeah, because this was in our packet. So you're right, Ronnie. We need to add some items for for noise pollution mitigation.
Noise pollution.
As we discussed in yesterday's meeting, and it is several bullet points.
Yep.
Including the visitor count, which is great for noise pollution, but as Karen pointed out, great for so much of our planning that we're trying to accomplish.
Can I add, like the USU campus? I'm curious what has to happen with that still.
That's a big staff thing, and Nora can like speak to it too. Chuck and Nora it's a big review process for us.
Yeah, I will talk about that when I get a chance to say my 2 cents worth.
Oh, like in your agenda item?
Yes.
Got it.
I have a little PowerPoint.
Well, so thank you, Carly, for the list and the reminder. And it does sort of remind me of when we had in our strategic planning prior, sort of the list by department, by, are we just started? Are we midway? Are we final into it? So I actually do like this bulleted list better. I think, we're not crawling out from under a rock. So we kind of do know where we are loosely with every given project. I like that you took from what was on the spreadsheet because we know that that's coming. And so I just think, thank you for putting this on the agenda as a tool for us to review and to remind us like pennies do add up to dollars and that this is helpful. Some of the items are pennies, some of them are dimes. Maybe one of them is a quarter. But I do think that if it's on this list, it also feels like we've committed to it. And there might be some, bleed over, some of these are some of these are long game items too. So to say it's our strategic, what we do in the next year may also not be, there's my alarm, 7:30. So may not be it. So, okay, well, I'm gonna move us right along to where we're going down the road of the strategic planning 2021. We are so we kind of swapped visioning and commitment. So we're at planning. We are at planning. So, and just a heads up, planning is between now and 8:15. And then OHV issues 8:15 to 9 o'clock. So Nora, you said you have a presentation, so let's do it. And then maybe, we'll take a quick break after we're done with this at 8:15, and then we'll finish with OHV.
My screen is being really weird. Okay. So I do have a really short PowerPoint, and my speech is particularly gravelly. It all has to do with lungs. So I apologize for that. I'm not trying to be sexy or anything. That's just not for me.
But you're doing such a good job.
So I put this together this afternoon after a fair amount of thought, and it's a little bit of a reality check and stepping back and kind of looking at some really big issues. I mean, in my career, I have seen many communities victim to a progression of growth that doesn't seem to be able to be stopped or slowed down. And I'm hoping in Moab, and you guys have the vision and to do this, is to try to really look down the line and figure out, well, what do we want to be? Do we want to be a haven for rich people that have second homes? Do we want to try to maintain our little center Moab area? I mean, and we have to do really intentional things, or it's going to happen anyway. So there are just some things to kind of think about, and I have more ideas about this, but I just thought I'd put some context on it. So I'm going to share my screen, maybe, if I can. Okay. For some reason, oh gosh, that doesn't work. Well, anyway. Zoom is sort of confusing things, but.
There you go. Yes, we can see it now.
So every time I try to go to start from beginning, it switches back to the other screen, which is where you guys are. So I apologize for that. It's just going to be this way. Okay, so I believe pretty firmly that what happens in the next 2 or 3 years will fundamentally change the character of Moab. I think it will happen whether we want it to or not. And so I think we have to be real conscious about our decisions. I've seen it happen almost everywhere I've worked. And goodness knows, like the Colorado ski towns have all been through this. desirable communities everywhere are all going through kind of the same progression. Okay, so to give you some context about what I meant by the previous statement is we have some enormous projects on the horizon. And one of them isn't even in the city limits, but it's still worth talking about because it will greatly impact the overall area. Lions Back, we all know about. It's an old entitlement, but compared to these other projects, it's tiny. So we have Lions Back is 206 or 8 units of mostly detached single family for nightly rentals or second homes or permanent residences. I am not sure how many permanent residences will actually live there. Some, but it's definitely not. There are 18 units of affordable housing proposed, but it's not someplace I will ever be able to afford to live. I'm quite sure. And that's on 139 acres. Then we just had a conversation today, and this is the USU thing, with a consultant who is working with the developer that Sitla has partnered with to look at the property around the USU campus. It's all Sitla. There's a bunch of it anyway. There's 320 acres-ish. And when we annexed it, we zoned it R4 and C4, our two most permissive zones. So we looked at kind of a first blush at what they're starting to think about. We're talking about over 1,200 units on 320 acres.
First blush, not first bluff, right?
First blush.
Yeah.
First blush. I know. That was my reaction. Multifamily, student housing. Fortunately, a lot of that will come in the first phase just because of the fit configuration of the property. Then they want to do a whole middle section that's like a high-end resort, which includes high-end single-family homes up on the hill with killer views, as well as sort of a more concentrated kind of resorty feel village. Who knows? And they want them available for nightly rentals, almost all of them, except the affordable housing. They are willing to do affordable housing, so that's a good thing. A lot of single-family households across the hillside. We have advised them as to soils issues and slope issues and all that, but they have a pretty big vision and a lot of hillside development. So my brain exploded this afternoon because and I told the consultant, I said, this will double the size of Moab, you know, when it's all said and done. So we need to, that's in something with a lot of density is going to happen there because it's Sitla land. So that is going to be huge. And with that comes part of the change, more second homeowners, more people being able to fly from Salt Lake to Moab, who can come and stay in their second home, more nightly rentals, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the more convenient we make it, which we want to do because we're a visitor destination, totally acknowledge that. But at some point, you know, we need to make sure and not be just that, just a tourist destination. We still want it to be a good place to live.
Nora, can I ask a question?
Sure.
It says a potential of 1,200 units. Is that total? Does that include nightly rentals, single family households?
Yes. Yeah.
And the student housing?
Yes.
And was there anything in their vision that included restaurants or grocery stores or?
We designated a fair amount of the acreage as C4. C4 allows residential uses. And right now that's what they're thinking. But I encourage them to go back and relook at some commercial uses. So hopefully they will do that. They had on this very preliminary plan, they had basically no commercial. So, and I said, I think you want to relook at that. But anyway, and then
Can I ask a question about this Sitla Arches development?
Yeah, that was what I was going to start talking about.
Yeah.
So
where's the water going to come from?
It's not in the county. And there was an article in the paper about it, and the county has been starting to talk to, again, potential developers for Sitla. Sitla owns 1,464 acres across from 313 and, kind of up beyond that. And the county just did some area planning to try to help with the vision for this area. But I think their vision is very much resort, lots of units, high end, because that's what will gain the most profit for ultimately Sitla and the schools. They're not going to build little tiny houses on lots for somebody like me to buy. That's just not economically their charge. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that is their charge, and that's what they will follow. So we will have very little control over that other than participating in the process. It's inevitable at some point, unless something radical happens.
Something radical. Nora?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. A friend of mine who bought a parcel just across the highway from there some years ago, when she put in her home, she was told that she had very limited water rights. Just enough to cook on, basically, because her home was near Arches National Park. This place that you're describing here is far bigger and much closer to Arches. So where the hell are they going to get the water from?
Excellent question. I have no idea. And they probably don't either at this point, but they're just starting their preliminary idea.
But are they going to want to annex into the city?
That has not been requested. They've been working, Troy, Harold, and the Sitla people have been working with the county.
Okay, so Nora, forgive me, Nora, I got a question for you. So I've been talking water, safe yield, the fact that our local culinary aquifer may be getting close to state mandated limits, in which case water gets a lot dicier. And the journalist that I was talking to kept asking me, what happens if you just wanted to stop growth? And could you just do it arbitrarily? Could you do it for water-related reasons? So if the journalist had asked you that, how would you respond?
Well, relative to the Sitla parcels, we have very little control. They could develop their own water sources, I suppose. I think the USU they will want to hook onto our water system, which is another thing I have a little bit later in the presentation. But yeah, there will be hurdles, no doubt. But I'm just saying, with as much Sitla land as we have, this is going to be the trend. So without getting into detail.
Nora, I'm sorry to interrupt, but also the development of the Utah Raptor Park is happening right there as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's just another, it adds on to all of that. Overnight accommodations, for sure.
What's not on this big projects list is the development of, I'm gonna start calling it Moab South, because that's the intention of San Juan County to develop and incorporate a city in our valley called Moab South, and all of the development that goes along with it. But that is absolutely the intention, that they are going to incorporate a separate city in the south of our valley.
And that may be an appropriate thing for them to do. I don't know, but.
And then that's just adding that much more big. I don't know what we would call that, but that's a big project around Moab.
It is. And, we all need revenue, and the best revenue is big boxes and, retail sales. And that is a real fear. Okay. So how can we maintain Moab? This is something I just want you all to keep in mind. How do we maintain Moab as a community and great place to live, work, recreate with all of this new development? And I don't have the answers for sure, but I think it's something that we need to keep in the back of our mind, whether, I don't know, but we need to be very cognizant of that. All right, come on.
We start with better broadband.
That's true.
Fiber to residential neighborhoods.
So here's some sort of key concerns of it that are in my brain. How do we maintain our community character? What I'm talking about is for locals. You know, how do we maintain Moab is a great place to live that has a total mix of housing types, has, albeit mostly white, still has lots of diversity in terms of income levels. I mean, it's great in that way. And I love this town. But we need to figure out how we maintain that. And that's hard. How we maintain our existing housing stock downtown and add affordable housing. You know, the more we increase density, the more property values will go up, which means that if we increase density without a requirement for it to be affordable, it's just pricing the rest of us out of the market. And we will see a lot of change to our downtown core into 5 and 6 townhomes. And that's what's going to happen if we continue. I mean, we need to relook at our density. Granted, I think density is a great thing, especially when we're trying to deal with a range of housing types. But we need to be cautious. That's all I'm saying. Higher density only for affordable housing. That's kind of just reiterating what I just said. We need to further address overnight accommodations, obviously. I know this has been on hold for a while, and I think maybe in the long run, that was a good thing because it's given the projects that were pending time to catch up. And right now, all of them are under construction that were pending, except for the Henry Shaw. So we are catching up, whether we'll see what the market does and what our numbers are, overnight stay numbers are for this year. Adequate sewer and water for all, huge issue. And then traffic, with all of these developments, even the little ones, even the more dense stuff in town will increase our traffic. And how are we going to deal with that? So a little bit about the planning department and the building department, the housing and code compliance. We all work together with engineering as a real team. And just so you know, there aren't very many of us. There's me and Corey, who is a rock star, by the way, in planning. Building has 2 employees, Barry, the building official, and then Laura Allred, who is awesome. We have 1 housing employee, that's Caitlin, and we all participate in everything really with each other. And then we have 1 code compliance officer. So that's it. It's not like somebody else can do the work. We have to do it just with that staff. Come on.
Well, Nora, I have to ask, I appreciate all of this. This is great. How would you answer your own questions? How do we then? What would you do if you could put life in your control to keep Moab the way everybody says they want, a rural, isolated place that we've all grown up loving? And here's the single biggest existential threat to all of that. And it seems like we're just totally out of control. What would you do with it if you had the choice?
I think we don't have enough time to even scratch the surface. And we, as part of our visioning, I think it's important that we address these issues. So let me finish this, but it's a huge issue and it's on my mind all the time. I dream about this stuff, how do I stop this from happening? Park City, I lived in for 25 years. I love it. I still love it, but it's a completely different place than the place I moved in 1980. The place I don't want to live anymore because I can't afford it. And it's just totally different. So what do we do? Now we're going to talk a little bit about our department and our workload and what we do. We have public inquiries via phone and email. There are lots of those. I probably get 5 phone calls. Corey probably gets 5. We get, emails every day. Just with general zoning questions, title companies, lots of stuff. And we try to provide good customer service. We review, the planning department, and specifically me, reviews every single building permit that is issued. I have to look at the plans. I have to make sure it complies with zoning. There's often some back and forth that has to happen, but we review every single building permit. We also review and have to sign off on every single certificate of occupancy. And then in addition to that, this is everyday stuff. Business license review. I review every single business license that comes through the door. And so does Barry, and so does Mona. And it's a lot of work. And I would say at least 50% of them, I have to do follow-up. I have to call, find out what they mean, find out, various information. So Carly and Marcy and I all agree we need to streamline that process. So it's not as complicated, but it's reality. And that's what I'm dealing with every day. Okay, so we also have applications that come in the door all the time. We do site plan review, small ones like, small developments, and then we have big ones that go to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission is primarily the review authority on those, or the staff is. So we do a lot of those. We do a lot of large and small subdivisions, lots of 2-lot subdivisions right now going on for the past couple of years. And then lots of record and final plats is something that, while isn't huge, it still has to show up on a meeting and get approved and write a staff report. And engineering has to make sure the plats are right, and so do we. So, and then variances, people have a right to request variances. They're pretty time consuming. And then code amendments, this is text and map amendments that are initiated by, by private parties. And right now, we have 2. One's on non-conforming uses, and the other one is on home occupations, not non-conforming uses. Anyway, one's on home occupations. Oh, and one is on the Wahoo stuff. So they're huge. I mean, they're big issues, not something that we can just resolve in one meeting. And then there's the long-range planning stuff, which includes city-initiated code amendments. And right now, as was on the list, we're working on pending ordinance doctrine, which establishes a pending ordinance, noise, and then this Planning Commission is going to start to talk tomorrow night about seasonal outdoor dining as a more permanent thing. We know we need to rewrite the zone provisions. We know we need to get back to overnight accommodations. And we also have a project tracking list that we have made available to you with all of the engineering and planning projects listed so that you can be aware of those. So these are our priorities on a day-to-day basis. Our top priority is dealing with everyday inquiries, people over the phone, people that email, people that want to meet via Zoom, general zoning questions, grammar requests, non-conforming use questions, which we get a lot of, and they take time and energy. And we try to give really good customer service. We try to respond within 24 hours to everyone, that, and sometimes that doesn't happen, but, that's what our goal is. And so for 2 of us, basically, Corey and I, to be handling all of those as well as all the other stuff is big. I probably got 10 emails today with some general questions. I probably, and while I'm on phone calls, I get, 10 emails, and also Zoom meetings all day long. So that's the first thing. We try to provide good public service and public information. Second thing is we have an obligation to process applications as they are submitted. There's some timeframes in state law that are kind of broad, but nonetheless, we need to be diligent about moving those applications through the process. We also have a process called pre-applications, which is a little bit more intensive than a general inquiry, and it requires us to really look at plans in more detail and give some feedback so that folks can determine the feasibility of a project and decide whether they want to move forward. And then there's everything else, So some of the issues, a lot of the projects that we're dealing with now are complicated and time consuming. And you probably know most of this, but our zoning code is internally inconsistent. It's all over the place. It says one thing here and another thing there. So it takes a lot of time and discussion to try to figure out what it really says. Lori's involved in these discussions too. The zoning code is often difficult to interpret. And the projects we're seeing now, the easy flat stuff is pretty much done. So a lot of what we're seeing now are more complicated pieces of property, projects that don't fit within our, our nice little vision and zoning. So they're things that take more time. In addition to this, we've been in a transition probably for the last 5 years of going from plans on a napkin to now we're at plans on 8.5 by 11s, which is pretty good. But, we require a fair amount of information in order for us to review and approve applications. And many of Moabites that have been here for a long time don't think necessarily that they should have to do that. So there's a real learning curve, and there's a lot of hand-holding for some of the people that have been in town for a long time. We can't just do things on the fly anymore. We have to have plans. They have to meet health and safety codes and building codes and planning codes. There's a lot of discussion about that. So what's our issue with our workload? We've received a flurry of applications this year. I think now that things are the COVID stuff is starting to sunset a little bit, I suspect financing is loosening up, and we've gotten a whole bunch of applications, especially in the last month. Daily emails and phone calls, we try to respond to within 24 hours. And then there are only a limited number of hours in the day and a limited number of staff. So what I'd like to get input, and you don't have to talk about this now, you can talk about it whenever, is are our priorities correct? And then what do we do when more projects are requested while we already have an unmanageable workload? So that's sort of touching on a little bit probably what Carly talked about, but that's the reality in the planning department. I just want to show you a couple examples. Can you see this? I changed my screen. You see my calendar?
Yes.
So this is this week. And as you can see, I probably have 4 hours a day that we're in Zoom meetings. So we have to put everything else in between there. And then this is our list of the projects that we've received recently. There's a whole bunch of them. And again, many of them are not simple and take a fair amount. Some of them are, 2-lot subdivision is not that big a deal, but we have a lot going on with just our limited staff. So I just wanted to give that as kind of a backdrop. We all work really hard. Like I said, every single staff person is amazing. Corey is totally amazing and he's so productive. And we all work really hard to try to do what is best for Moab. And I personally really respect the city council because you're willing to do the hard things and make the hard decisions. And I think that's great. You're really forward looking. You have the community in mind. It's not all about tax dollars. That's important, but it's not all about that. And so I really, really appreciate your efforts. Although sometimes it really is like making sausage. It's not pretty, but the outcome may be yummy. With that, I will stop and you guys can talk among yourselves.
Well, let's go ahead and unshare your screen so that we can kind of see when people are raising their hands and wanting to respond. And I just want to point out it is 7:57 and we have allocated only until 8:15. And this is a pretty big topic, but I feel like I want to start us off by saying when we met before you were hired, we met with the former planning director, and I feel like we had a similar message. Lots to do, great staff moving forward. And I remember asking, like, do you want another staff member? Would another staff member help? We hear loud and clear that this is a heavy lift. And, he said, no, I think I'm good. And so I'd like to, I recognize, Joel, I recognize that this is a fiscal question as much as it is, dealing with capacity question, but like we are exploding in growth and we have to plan for it. And we have, part of planning and zoning is the zoning piece as well. And so all of this does fall in your department. And so we have to have recognition, when when we add a new police officer, it's because we're told there's a need and we just do it. And so if what I'm hearing is that there is a need to expand our planning department, if we want to get this work done, then I want to respond to that need, but that need needs to be very clear.
Yeah, I understand that. And we are requesting one more position this year, split between us and planning, or building, because Barry is hammered. I mean, he works a lot, and is trying to keep up, and it's very difficult. So we are asking for another person this year, with the understanding that we need to be fiscally responsible, especially as we're still kind of digging ourselves out. But in the future, we certainly will need additional people. Also, you know, if we hire consultants for some of these big things, that's great, but it still takes staff time for us to kind of manage the process. So eventually, yeah, we need more people, but as government, that's always the way it is. I've never worked for a planning department that had enough people. And
but at the same time, we are, like you said, like exploding.
Yes.
And we, not only are we exploding within our municipality, but we are exploding around our municipality. And we do have to get a grip on that.
Yep, absolutely.
So council, I mean, are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing?
Yes. Now you asked the very question I wanted to ask. It sounds like, I mean, looking at the staffing levels for other mountain towns, I'm struck by typically how much more staffed they are for dealing with similar geographic size and development types and planning issues. And I mean, I look at how many staff, that staff list was extremely short in my mind from everything that I've seen. And given the challenges that we're facing, it just seems like, okay, understanding that like you may never have enough, but what do we need to face these challenges in the way we want to? And then what is the revenue source to support that? And how do we sell that to the people that are going to pay it?
Well, and I mean, I hate to say this, but it is strategic plan. And this is very tied. Every time we build a home, or, you know, one home is torn down and 4 homes are replaced, in any other municipality, that would mean you actualize more revenue through property tax. And for us, we do not have property tax. And so development does not pay for, you know, we don't have that revenue stream where development is able to pay for itself, even in the housing world.
And to be clear, Mayor, even in a community where you have a property tax, where you build a residential unit, that residential unit will never generate enough property taxes to cover the cost of the services that are provided by the municipality. Rooftops cost you money.
But it's an offset nonetheless.
Absolutely. And so I'm saying, like,
and the commercial properties are getting taxed too.
Yep. In the best case scenario, that doesn't get you enough, and we have zero.
And we have to have a real conversation, because like we're talking about having a strain on staffing. We're talking about exploding. We're talking about having a vision so that we know what to do. So what if in our vision process, we come back? I mean, Nora showed one slide of 3 big projects that are going to change the face of Moab, and didn't even include the expansion of and the construction of the entire south half of Spanish Valley. And so, you know, I'll say it in this meeting, like, we have to talk about a property tax. We are the only city in the state of Utah that does not charge a property tax. And even if it were modest, it could go toward staffing our planning department and getting organized so that the residents of the city of Moab and the businesses that are within the city of Moab have the services that they expect. And it starts in the planning department. And that it's code enforcement as well, not policing. but code enforcement. And I think sometimes we get confused between the two. And so I guess I'm just saying, and as a non-voting member, but as the mayor of city, that I support the idea that of looking into revenue, which includes a property tax for this very thing, to support the expanding staff, specifically in our planning department, so that we can get to doing the business of being organized of the development pattern in our valley and in our city.
And Mayor, if you look at the agenda tomorrow, on the budget aspect from 8:30 to 9, revenue enhancement is one of the listed items.
I just can't sit at a strategic planning anymore or go through a vision process anymore and continue to feel like we underfund our planning department.
Another thing about the property tax is that we are going to get additional overnight accommodations and second homes, a lot of them. I mean, some of them they're already entitled, like Lions Back. That's going to be entirely probably second homes and overnight accommodations. So those properties would be taxed at a higher rate if we had a property tax than my place or the house you live in.
And can I just be clear, just in case anyone's listening to this conversation too, the county charges a tax that goes toward county services. Moab City is the only city that does not connect a city tax to the taxes that residents and businesses pay annually. So I'm just going to repeat that again, because people don't understand that. They say, well, I pay a property tax, but they do not pay a property tax if they live within this municipality, which is the city of Moab. Every other city in the state of Utah charges a property tax. We do not. And I don't even think we can have to
qualify that. What you've said is they don't pay a property tax if they live in the city limits. They do pay a property tax, but they pay it to the county.
And to the school district and the mosquito abatement and the special service districts.
I understood what you were saying, but you just missed a couple words that needed to be there.
Yeah, let's be really clear about what we don't charge residents living within our municipality.
So Mayor, what you're asking basically is saying to city residents, how about we tax you in order so that the planning office can keep up and turn the town into something that nobody wants?
That's not exactly how I would interpret it. I would say that my impression is that currently the staff is just busy responding to permit applications. Like Nora's described how she is like thinking about this stuff all the time, and yet we interact with her, if I may say so, very little about these like big picture planning issues, because she and her staff are obligated to respond to permit applications within a reasonable amount of time. So that ends up taking the priority. And so just adding another permit tax so Nora can do what she has the experience and skills to do, which is help lead the process that we would be a part of in responding to these existential crises. So that's how I interpret it. Not that a property tax would just facilitate more growth.
Ronnie, just go ahead and speak. Yeah.
Oh, no, I realize we only have probably 7 or 8 minutes, and I didn't know if, and this is all important, I'm sure we'll have other property tax and staffing discussions with the budget, but were we hoping to delve it all into, we might have already, but I was just checking these other 4 items, the code update, overnight accommodations, noise issues, and we might have already, I didn't know through understanding the workload if that covered work priorities or if we were hoping to talk about setting some. So I just wanted to say I was watching the time.
Can I say one other thing real quick about Nora's department? When we reduced staff in May, we reduced 20% through furloughs and reduction in force. There was that was spread out across all the departments across the city, and every single department saw that 20% reduction except for 2. Treasurer department, because the billing was not going to change, and the planning department. This planning department, when I got here, had 0 employees and has been running razor thin since the day I got
Seriously, Karen.
Muted.
Nora, I'm just curious, would a permit tech be adequate?
So what we're thinking, and certainly this can be fleshed out and discussed a lot more. Laura does all our administrative stuff and she helps Barry a lot. Laura's in the process of getting her certification for official permit tech. So then she can really help Barry with his workload. So the additional person that we're talking about is somebody to do a lot of the administrative stuff, which isn't huge, but it's there. And then also hopefully being maybe sort of serve as like a zoning clerk or a first point of contact that actually has some knowledge, but can also do administrative things. So that's what's in my head right now. And I'm used to, we have to be fiscally conservative and I can't ask for 10 people, but we certainly need more staff if we're going to try to achieve the goals that you want to achieve.
Okay, that's like clear as day as a request for me. We're strategic planning. We're talking about a vision, like as much as like we could go through like other items, like that's clear. Planning department needs at least another full-time position that is the position that you're describing, Nora, now. And the council has to, you know, make a decision and say yes to that. And I want to support that. I want to ask this council to support that request.
We can't continue to ask for these things that we feel like we need. These aren't cosmetic wants. These are domestic needs. And this is what we need. What we're asking from 2 people and 2.5 people, however you want to configure that department, is unrealistic. So I think we have to.
I'm certainly supportive, but I'm aware that we're also asking for more vehicle code or law enforcement. I'm not sure which, as well as rehiring sustainability director and a Parks and Rec tech. And I'm just not sure how it works out overall in the budget. So I'm aware that we have a number of priorities, and I don't know what's going on with the budget and where we've run into the wall, or if we're getting there. And so
I think, Caitlin, what I'm hearing is this is a priority, which is great. And as we keep working through this process over the next 2 days, this is exactly the information I need so I can go back to the budget and prioritize this over maybe something else and figure out how to get that money.
So let me add my affirmation that I do support Nora's request. Nora, I don't mean to pick on you. I think it's great. You're clearly that you guys are overworked. I'm not blaming you, mind you. I'm blaming SITLA, really. I mean, they're behind the driving force between all these huge developments, okay? They're the problem, not you. And I agree with Kaylin and with Joel both. You know, there's a budget. We'll have to work all this out. But I'm certainly empathetic that you guys need help.
Honestly, if the state would help us out with OHV noise and would help us out with, you know, noise mitigation efforts, and with, you know, more the responsiveness with SITLA developments, we would not be in this pickle. It's frustrating.
But Mayor, I was just curious. I mean, looking through everybody's workload, Walnut Lane takes up a ton of time in every department, and I'm curious if there is something that we're missing that that needs to happen, because it's across engineering, planning, the city engineer, the attorney. I mean, it's like the inspectors. You guys talked about every other department coming and helping with maintenance and everything else. there seems to be a discussion we need to have, and I can't pin it, but something is there.
Yeah, the problem with Walnut Lane is it's so complex. One day I need legal review to draft and look at contracts. The next day I need literally facilities to go down there and re-roof a trailer. I mean, it literally is so complex in the problems that 1, 2, 3, 4 people in one department would never have the skill set to run that project. The next day I need streets to go in there and clear all the weeds and debris. You know, it literally is just so complex that it is a citywide project. There's no getting around that with Walnut Lane.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about Walnut Lane, if Walnut Lane were owned and operated by a private business, if they needed any of one of those things, they would just hire out and then they would pay for the service. And we're kind of in-housing all of the work.
Well, and the thing too is if it was a private business, it'd just be 36 trailers and you'd just be doing maintenance and grounds upkeep. But we're doing development and we're doing maintenance and we're doing upkeep and we're doing legal when we're having to evict someone, or, I mean, we're literally running the gamut of a property management and a development team.
If you were private, you would have scraped you would have scraped the trailers.
Well, if we were going for
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, really, like that. I mean, there's
absolutely, if you were going for highest and best use of the property value, for sure. But I'm saying if you were trying to operate it as what we're trying to do, right? I mean, you'd either leave it the way it was as trailers, or you would scrape it and build the project. You wouldn't be doing both, that's for sure.
Right.
So I am gonna call time because we're at time on this. We want to make sure that we're sticking to our agreed upon agenda. So that got juicy and we're moving on. But I'm grateful for the sentiment shared. And Nora, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to drop off soon and just listen to the rest of it on YouTube.
Okay. So we are going to move on to OHV issues. And thank you for that presentation. Moving on to that. So we've got under this noise impacts and enforcement and traffic enforcement. So Brett.
We get a water break.
Yeah. Brett, thanks for sticking around. And let's just take a minute, just 1 minute. Okay, everybody, I'm just gonna stop my video for a minute.
So I see that appears to have been our opportunity to talk about overnight accommodations. Oh, well.
Hence the question.
Yeah.
I can see what I can do about. We'll just have to put it on another agenda at one of our upcoming meetings as a workshop. I can move that item to an upcoming meeting as a workshop.
Mm-hmm. She also had noise impacts on her section. Is that something we need to move to from her end?
I think it's the stuff we're already discussing in the realm of OHV and vehicles and motorcycles and everything else. But we're meeting tomorrow to go over what we go over tonight. I will make sure that gets moved to a workshop at one of our next meetings.
Okay. Is everybody back? We're waiting on Mike and just ran. And my heart rate feels good. Okay. OHV.
OMG.
I know it's a good way to end this meeting here. So let's start by saying, first of all, we had a pretty intense hour-and-a-half workshop yesterday. So, Joel, this is on our agenda. Council, where do we need to go with this?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We could go back up and talk overnight accommodations and noise issues and noise issues from the last one and leave off those other two rather than, but that's a question for you guys.
Noise issues, noise impact. I mean, they are the same. So definitely we want to talk about noise. But we also have Brett, if we want to talk more specifically about enforcement too, which we did in the workshop, but not a whole lot. So I didn't know if we wanted to talk about like some of the chatter that I've been seeing around the county and doing stops at King Creek and Mill Creek. Yep, Karen.
I was just curious if we're gonna have the opportunity tomorrow to talk about overnight accommodations then, or that?
Well, because of the legality of, we could talk about it. It's not on the agenda, but we're not making decisions. I would suggest if we don't go back to it, that we put it on as a work meeting at one of our next council meetings.
We also have a planning commission meeting tomorrow, so Nora and Corey might not be available, depending on how that goes. If she wants to do it tomorrow, that's all.
Well, can I just, would it be worth it to just see if there's consensus among the council? Are we in a position where we want to move forward with revisiting overnight accommodations in the upper quadrant of our, what is it, the special area, the special recreation, special
RC
resort, SAR zone? Ronnie?
It's not a high priority for me at this time, given everything else we're facing and the list that Nora just gave us. I mean, we really need to get a handle. And there's so many water and sewer questions related to all of this. That's far more pressing to me to be dealing with before we get to that. It's just a matter of priorities, and that water and sewer are basic for all of us living here. And that has to come way before for me.
Is it a priority to council members for any particular reason?
I'm just, because I feel like it was a really big issue for us, and we had our moratorium, which I think has been very helpful for us, but we can't ignore it forever. So I'm just kind of curious where we're at. I mean, that's for me. And can we continue this indefinitely? I mean, because water is absolutely the golden question in terms of our future development. So
one thing that, to follow along those thoughts, one thing that I've been thinking about, and this ties into one thing that Mike's bringing up repeatedly, and that's the carrying capacity based on water, as well as a presentation that from 2 CAS meetings ago about the use of the bed unit as a management tool in Whistler. And so it seems like we've been talking about overnight accommodations and kind of like in isolation, and like trying to make individual developments perform better, but not really tying it necessarily into any sort of big picture hard carrying capacity. And given what we heard about Whistler, I'm wondering about doing that because they've capped their total number of bed units through a ratio. They have a direct relationship between resident housing that's affordable to residents relative to the number of accommodation units. I could see that being tied into weather limits and other carrying capacity measurements. So I'm wondering, I agree that we need to talk about overnight accommodations eventually, but I'm wondering if the way we are planning to pursue it is quite right, given what we need to accomplish.
So number one, is anyone feeling pressure to discuss overnight accommodations currently? Because I am not, and I am just curious, is anyone feeling pressure to discuss this? If not, then I feel like that what you just described, Kaylin, is exactly what we want to touch on with visioning, that carrying capacity. And so I would say that's where that would be seated. And then again, as was stated, Nora and our planning department is full as well. And so we have a couple of steps to get to that conversation that you're referring to, Kaylin, which I'm very excited to have. And I feel like it's vision, and I think it's planning, and I think it's another position. And unless there's a burning reason, then I would say we don't need to discuss any further overnight accommodations unless somebody's got reason to. Karen?
And I don't have a burning reason. And hearing from Nora tonight, I mean, that seems like that was new information. So I don't want to be, again, having to make decisions at the last minute and being knee jerk if all of a sudden it's like we're putting this plan in and we haven't done the proper work that needed to be done before that happens. So I don't know how long those developments are out, and I just don't want to be caught behind.
Yeah, my two bits. No, I'm happy to put overnight accommodations on the back burner. Keep it there. Carrying capacity issues should be an easy sell. If we start getting pressure from the legislature, tell them we've got carrying capacity issues. These are very real. And guys, by the way, another week or two, MOPS is going to have a meeting, and we're going to have 3 or 4 science groups present their take on carrying capacity of water. So we'll have some new information about it then. But this is a very real deal, and I think we can use that to our advantage to help control growth.
All right, so back burner, moving forward, OHV noises, noise. And I really, I do appreciate, I'm saying OHV noises because I see that as how it was written for this agenda. But I'm really, in response to the OHV community and the legislature, the clarity that we received from this legislative session is that it is a noise pollution issue, and we don't need to isolate any one particular user group. So we are moving forward with that sentiment that we are talking about quality of life, we are talking about noise pollution, and we are looking for mitigation efforts. And unfortunately, they're going to cost money. They're going to put our officers at risk. And that is where we are. So, okay. I just feel like we had such a long workshop yesterday. I'm kind of at a loss of how we just dive back into this topic. So, oh, good, Ronnie. Questions, I bet.
Actually, a little context. So we had a lot of ideas. We came to the agenda yesterday with a lot of things on there. We had a lot of other ideas thrown out. So I guess I'm looking for a little advice from staff and the chief maybe about, are we looking to create a longer laundry list with maybe some associated costs and timelines to help us prioritize which ones are most feasible to do first? I mean, we know, thanks to other council members and staff, there's work on an ordinance right now, and there's work on increased enforcement. And so obviously it seems like those two are already running, and maybe those are the two to focus on first, to hear from staff what they need from us to advance those. But I mean, there have been a lot of other ideas thrown out there, so I just don't want to lose those. So I guess I'm looking for a little input from the staff, since they help us with that, on how to attack all that. But I guess my first question as a council member is, what does the chief need and what does staff need to advance the ordinance and to get the staff and supplies and money to get the increased speed limit enforcement, noise enforcement going, the revamped noise ordinance? I guess I'm trying to get a timeline in my head too. I know some of it, but not all of it.
Lori and Brett, do you want to talk to that timeline?
Sure. Yeah. As quickly as possible. And so I think our timeline is really immediate to work on redrafting the noise ordinance. And then I think the biggest next step is enforcement. And I know that we are coordinating with the county quite a bit to try and put together the options for enforcement. We have plans working with the county for doing checkpoints, and that those, we're trying to get those sooner rather than later, because we know we're entering the time when vehicular noise is going to likely increase in Moab as we get additional visitors when the weather becomes much nicer. So our time frame is really like, I mean, my goal is hopefully to see a draft or have a draft of revised ordinance circulating amongst staff within a week or two. And then, we need to circulate that amongst ourselves, obviously working with the chief on realistically if it's the things we put in the ordinance are enforceable. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief to see if there's anything.
Thank you. From a timeline perspective, for us to do any kind of noise enforcement, we need equipment. Ordering the equipment is roughly 5 to 6 weeks out for delivery, and then you're going to have training time as well. So if we assume that we order it this week, we're now into mid to end of April before the equipment arrives. And then we have to have someone from that company come down and train our officers in how to use it. And so getting that scheduled will, another week to two from there. So, realistically, before we could even consider doing any kind of actual noise enforcement, we're into May. I also have to point out that from a staffing perspective, we're doing everything we can now for traffic enforcement. But we don't have enough people, and I know no department in the city has enough people. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but we don't have enough people. We had an officer, he hasn't officially turned in his notice yet, but he has been hired by the sheriff's office and he will be leaving us. And we have 2 more who are going to be leaving us in the near future. So we're going to be going into the busy season with 12 officers. We'll do what we can, but I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be much. And I hate to be that blunt, but that's the fact. We need a lot more cops, and it takes a long time to hire officers and get them through training. Even if we, are able to get a batch of officers who are already Utah certified, we still have to get them through the hiring process and then get them through the field training process. So, from a timeline perspective, we could potentially be doing or have the capability to do noise enforcement starting sometime in May. Realistically, it isn't realistic. We will do everything that we can for the community and for the council.
Lori, if I may ask, per the conversation yesterday, did we decide to change this from a criminal sort of citation to a civil sort of citation, and you guys writing the ordinance to reflect that?
Well, so that's a great question. I think that's one of the many options we'll present to you for consideration. And I think what we were thinking was that the first two violations would be civil, but if you got a third violation, that one would in fact be criminal. So to answer your question, it would be a hybrid of both. But that is, we definitely have to talk about that. I want to talk to the chief more about that. I want to see how that plays out. There may be problems with that process that we haven't anticipated. The reason we initially think it's a good idea is that it decreases my heartburn a little bit about how difficult it would be to create this new system, because we are kind of creating a new system and having it challenged in court. In civil court, as Joel mentioned yesterday, the standard of proof is a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. So that would make it easier for us to defend, especially because we expect that someone may try and challenge this. So Mike, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. One easy question for you. Is there anything to stop us from setting progression of severely for multiple offenses to make, say, a warning, for example, the first time out, and then a nominal fine, and then a bigger fine for a second offense? I mean, I want some sort of tool that makes it worthwhile for people to change their muffler rather than pay the fine.
Correct. You could make it progressive, certainly. And
great.
Mike, it was an easy question. Usually when someone says they're going to ask an easy question, it's not an easy question.
Oh, trust me, Lori. I mean,
100% I trust you.
Thank you.
Ronnie?
Given citizens to be heard statements we received yesterday, how serious do we think people offering to help would be about financial assistance to pay for equipment, educational materials, and or staff time? Because I really do feel like this problem was created by the legislature, but the industry plays a role. And they have made an offer. I didn't hear a real specific one maybe, but I was curious if anyone heard anything more specific than me, especially as we were talking about cost of noise test kits, but obviously, our huge expense is staff time. And I guess I have a follow-up question for the chief. What is the hiring environment now in the country? I'm guessing it's still hard to hire, period. I mean, let alone the time that it takes, but I was just going to check if anything has changed on that.
It has changed, and it's changed for the negative because of the political environment and social environment. People don't want to be cops. They don't want to be under the microscope. They don't want to have that kind of stress in their lives. And so agencies nationwide are having difficulty recruiting. I'll tell you, I tested with Phoenix Police in 1995. 5,000 people showed up to test for about 10 jobs. They don't have that happening now. We have applications open right now. We've received, in about 5 weeks, we've received 17 applications. Probably 13 of those are solid, relatively solid, based on just reviewing the applications and resume. 3 of those are out of state. So you have to wonder why a trooper in Vermont wants to come be a cop in Moab. There's there are obvious things like Moab's awesome and we've got some great recreational opportunities, but if you're a sergeant with the troops in Vermont and you've been there for 12 years, what's the draw for Moab? So the hiring environment is not positive.
Brett, I'm going to share the conversation that you and I had a little while ago about creative ideas of law enforcement. But first, I wanted to share to Ronnie as well, the first part of your question there was, can we get some people to pay for some stuff? And I think we need to put together a proposal for UTV Utah and Utah Off-Road and Rally on the Rocks organizers and see if they will buy some stuff. So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask Chief to put together no?
No, I can make this easier. The city of Moab and any city in the state of Utah is always open to donations. We get donations all the time. People will come in and write us a check.
What I'm saying is if Brett could put together a letter, like kind of a request letter, that this is what we're looking at getting for noise enforcement. And we're looking for sponsors.
But what I'm saying too is they can walk in, we get donations for the animal shelter all the time where it says, this is for the animal shelter for this
No, they
specific
can't.
purpose.
I think we have to ask.
I think part of the idea is, I mean, which would be very educational for me as a council member, and I'm sure our residents, is to see a budget of what we think all this stuff is going to cost us. And then I think what the mayor is saying is if you present that to some of these groups and say, oh, look, this is what it's going to cost us, you know, would you be willing to contribute?
And it's not nebulous then. It's like
normally you have you're a gold donor, you're a bronze donor. Well, you could be, you know, gold would be you pay for one of our officers for a year. And silver could be, yes, you just buy their vehicle.
Well, I
think
think
could be you buy
officers platinum.
Yeah, but I think that we even have residents who would want to donate to that cause. I mean, they've been very loud and clear about that.
We should put together like whenever in my fundraising world, asking for just blanket support. We did, you know, it was not as effective as saying, would you please give us this? And this is what we will do with the money. And so, Joel, do you think you and Brett could collaborate on a one pager?
I mean, I think that's easy. I don't know. I mean, I guess what we're really doing is asking people to put their money where their mouth is as far as people who've said they're going to donate, but I think we all know how that's going to go. So how much time do you want us to really put into this?
Let's give all people the option of supporting this effort.
Well, I figure, yeah, and I figure it's good outreach to have the budget because if nothing else, the legislature should see what our costs are going to be because.
So I have a little bit of a concern about taking money from people or organizations that may not share our goals ultimately, or when we actually set the decibel limits and the testing protocols. I just don't want to set false expectations. And hearing what the financial resources that are needed for this, I mean, especially in terms of the staffing, I mean, maybe I'm thinking too small, but I'm just wondering if someone's going to actually come through in a way that, I mean, I hear what the cost of noise meters are, and yeah, it's significant, but I mean, it's not that significant.
Well, here's the thing, Kaylin, UTV Utah and Utah Off-Road attended our meeting and Zoomed in yesterday during Citizens to be Heard, although they were not citizens and they were afforded that ability because we're Zooming. And they said, we want to be part of the solution and we want to help and we've offered to help. And we are not bad actors and we would like to be part of the noise mitigation and we support noise ordinance and enforcement. And so let's be really clear about what we're asking. They have the option to say yes or no, just as any resident would, but that's what a donor gets to do is decide where they put their money. And if they want to leverage it by saying, well, I want the decibel levels to be 105 and I'll give you the donation. Well, then clearly that won't work for us. But but I do want to share something else. And I'm looking at time. One thing that Brett and I talked about a while back, and it's like in this COVID year, I really, Brett, I don't even know when we talked about it, but we brainstormed about this idea of a special unit, if you will, that would be a special recreation unit. So we know based on our recreation pattern and our guides that come to Moab. They'll bike guide in the spring and in the fall, and they will head to the mountains for the summer and the winter to be ski patrol or ski, work in the ski industry, and also just play in the mountains and support that, mountain recreation when it's really hot here and business is slow. And so in the same pattern and with the same vein, Brett and I talked about crafting an ask and just starting a conversation with the state about what it would be to have sort of seasonal officers, where the officer would have year-round employment, but then they would perhaps spend some of their time here and some of their time there. Now, I know your wheels are turning and you're like, well, what if they have kids and what if this is this and that? But as we know, as we go through life, we take jobs based on where we are in our life. And so that position might be really exciting for some and maybe not so exciting for others. And so Brett and I talked about it, and I have floated it out to certain people. We're coming out of a pandemic, so any seeds that were, idea seeds that were planted, maybe we can put some water to them through this spring. And I do think that, this is a great opportunity to say, this is why we, as a gateway community, as a resort community, do need seasonal, a seasonal lift. And this is something that we could ask from the state. And so Brett, I don't know if you want to talk a little more about like the logistics of that, just to plant the seed out there of what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, from a logistics standpoint, if we're bringing officers in from out of town, they have to have someplace to stay. So the city's going to have to figure out how we're going to house X number of officers who are coming to help. There is an analogy between seasonal like guides and officers in that, somebody in, I don't know, like Vail, they're busier during the winter when the ski season is on, and maybe a little less busy in the summer. But generally speaking, it's more difficult for agencies to give up officers at any given time. So I'm not opposed to the idea. I think it's a good idea if we can make it work, but I think with law enforcement, it will be a lot more challenging. So from a logistics standpoint, getting an officer from another agency to come to Moab for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're going to have to house them. We're going to have to potentially feed them. Most agencies are not going to allow them to work with their agency uniform. So we'll have to figure out how to provide uniforms and equipment for them, cars for them. So from a logistics standpoint, there's a lot of work, but I think it's still something that is worth exploring.
And couldn't it also be something where the state could even look at doing, so, the state has like highway patrol. Mm-hmm. There is a mechanism where maybe this special unit could be housed and I don't remember what the label was, but you alluded to it when we were talking before about like how you borrow officers from different,
like Park City, for example, they have probably more than any other agency definitely in Utah, if not in the West. They have more events every year than any other agency in Utah. And they have their full-time staff. They also have a part-time staff. And then they have something like 50 some odd, quote unquote, event officers who come from other agencies all over the Salt Lake, that valley area. They wear their own agency uniform when they come in to help, and they're always assigned to given assignments that don't rely on them to know the layout of Park City. So it would be something like they're directing traffic at XYZ intersection because they're not call responsive. They don't have to know if there's a call at Woody's. They don't need to know where Woody's is. So their responsibility, and I'm not using that as, I'm not saying that we get called to Woody's all the time. It's just first thing came to mind. So they're assigned to areas where that is their only area. All they have to do is direct traffic through this one intersection, or all they have to do is stand security on one corner. In that respect, it makes it easier for those officers to come to work for Park City. If that's something that we could look at doing, it would certainly be an option. But the difference is it's a 1 or 2 night event. It's not a 2, 3, 4 week period where we need them. So we would have to figure out how to best use an officer for 1 to 2. If we could only do it for 1 to 2 nights, how we could best use them for that time frame.
Would that be an option, say, for the few times a year we can do the stationary stops?
I was just going to say the same. I was just going to ask the same thing, because actually Bruce Huntington, who spoke yesterday as a citizen to be heard, is an officer in Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's definitely something we could use for that. They would have to be trained in how to use the sound, the noise meters. They would have to be trained on our system, because our records management system, because any citations or warnings that they issue would be issued out of our system. So there would be some training components, some certification components. And then if anything did go to court, they would have to come back to Moab to attend court. So we could certainly, it's certainly an option.
I'm just curious, Chief, Joel, Carly, I mean, staff, do you guys have any other suggestions for us? Because, tonight, I didn't know till, we got in this section of the meeting that we were potentially losing 3 officers, which is a huge hit. And
I didn't know that either, Ronnie.
Okay, well, that seems to really kind of change things. Like, we had been at least a little bit hopeful, that we could hire some more people, and then also with what we had, that we could attack some of the noise thing. But now it seems like, we basically one of our 4 limbs has been cut off, and so I guess I'm just looking for advice from you guys, because I'm a little bit at a loss.
I only learned this afternoon that we were looking at losing those 3, and there are 2 more who I'm told are looking. So, I mean, there's a potential that we could lose up to 5. But one of them has already received an offer. One of them is in the final stages of process with another agency, and the other one, his house is under contract, and he will be leaving. So, but
okay, well,
I got all that information this afternoon.
Time to think about it, yeah. But
yeah. So, we have the 2 additional positions. We were at 15. We have the 2 additional positions to get us up to 17. We all know that's still, we're very thankful for that, but it's still nowhere close to where we need to be. But if we do lose 3 people, now we're trying to hire 5 officers for a 15 agency, a third of our staff. So it's a daunting task.
Brad, I have a quick question going back to borrowing officers or, temporary officers. Is there a chance that we could do that with recently retired officers? Is that something that could work if we were going to, do stationary stops? Or
it could. We don't have any recently retired officers, but we could potentially look at doing that. And a lot of agencies actually do that. They have officers who retire and then they come back and work part-time. We did start a part-time program toward the end of last year. We have 1 current part-time officer and 1 who is about to go through the process to become a part-time officer, which will involve, 12 weeks of field. In a full-time capacity, it's 12 weeks of field training. With a part-time officer, it'll take 6 months to get him through that training. But if we have recently retired officers, we absolutely could use them if they were willing to come back and work for us.
And what about like a statewide umbrella? Would that require too much? What
do you mean by a statewide umbrella?
If there were recently retired officers statewide that we could bring in? Or is it too logistically sticky?
From a logistics standpoint, it really isn't. All the certifications are state certifications, so it wouldn't be an issue from that standpoint. The issue would be getting them trained. They have to learn our city, they have to learn our policies, learn how to use our records management system and integrate into our workflow. So from that perspective, it's no problem. Where do they stay when they come down?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if the city is not able to provide them with a place to stay while they're here, which many other cities do, Jackson, Wyoming has multiple housing units and condos around town that they use for part-time officers. Can't remember the other. Carbondale has a facility where they allow officers to stay. So if we can figure out the housing component, I think it would be easy. Really isn't, I don't even think is the right word. I think there are a lot of cops who would love to be able to come down to Moab and work part-time if it was easy for them to do it. So if we can make it easy for them, I don't think it'll be a problem to attract part-time officers. And, you know, currently we're looking for up to 5. We could do 10, 15, you know, and have a pretty good part-time officer staff, a really solid part-time officer staff. But you know, the training component and housing are going to be the 2 big ones.
Is this a potential call out to overnight accommodations to say if they've got any capacity that they're willing to house? That's a pretty solid ask that we could put on that ask.
It is, and I've had discussions. I hesitate to say this in a public forum yet, but I've had discussions with EMS about utilizing some of their dorm facilities, unused dorm facilities, when the new EMS building is done, and they are open to it. So, you know, there is a potential that we could have a facility for 1, maybe 2 officers at the EMS building at some point in the future.
Hey, Brett, let me throw out one more idea. How about a robot? We're all familiar with speed limit signs along the side of the road, like on First North, for example. Clocks your miles per hour. Same deal, except it just gives you your dB noise as you pass by. All right. And it's an automated thing. And it would just, I don't know, it would inform people about, you know, about noise problem in the city.
Is that a real thing?
I'm about to invent it for you, Emily.
We could try it. I can tell you that anytime, literally every time we move our radar trailer to a new location, we get calls from citizens who thank us for putting it there because they notice a slowdown in traffic just because of that sign. So I do think that if we could put in more of the permanent radar signs that we have around town in some of the high traffic areas, specifically like Mill Creek, once you get through the intersection, you're headed south on Mill Creek. An area like that, I think, would be valuable. If we could have a couple more on Cane Creek, 5th West, you know, areas where we have regular issues with speeding, I think that would help reduce the amount of speeding violations that we're seeing. But you know, something with noise, I don't know. You know, we might have high school kids taking their mufflers off and running up and down to see just how loud, you know, who can get the highest score too. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. Let me sketch out a design, Mayor, for you, and I'll see how this works out. Okay.
Hey, run it by my 12-year-old son, who's all about like Arduino and electrical engineering these days.
That's what I am, you know, a double E. So I'll talk to him about it.
Yeah. All right. It's 8:57. My alarm is about to go off, saying that we are all done for today. I just want to give us a minute to just say thank you. And are there any final burning things that anyone needs to just blurt out right now?
Quick blurt. I've asked Lori about this. This is about not about noise, but about road misbehavior management. And My understanding is that red light cameras are not illegal in Utah. So I'm wondering if there would be support for seeing if UDOT would acquiesce to having red light cameras on Main Street to, and people could be warned about them. Perhaps just the threat that they might be there might be enough to cut down on the number of people running reds. So
Hey,
just,
they're burning. Karen, you're gonna make me say it at the end of this meeting.
So sorry. No, but Caitlin, to that though, what about when people are trying to make a left and you're stuck in the middle of the road and it's red? I mean, so they would get ticketed as well?
I don't know. I don't know about all the technical details about how those things are handled. But if they've entered the intersection on green, typically you pull partway in. So I don't know how it's handled, but it seems like other places have them and somehow they manage.
And
we have left-hand turn signal. Sorry. Okay.
So thank you all for coming in and zooming in for this meeting tonight, because I just want to, we got a next round for tomorrow. So
woohoo!
Yes. So thank you all for zooming in tonight. Have a great night, and I will see everybody tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Is it 6 or 6:15?
Sorry, thank you. 6:15, because Summer needed 15 minutes to get Planning Commission ready so that she could then join us tonight. Thank you, Ronnie. Such good attention to detail.